Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show.
Hence, after hearing his subordinates report that Forcas wanted to see him regarding something about the Tower of Dusk, Bradler immediately dropped the beloved art piece in his hands and asked Forcas to take him there. Your Majesty, Grina, the prince of the giant shark clan, has gotten into a conflict with the people of the Tower of Dusk. Teacher failed to persuade them, so he sent me to ask you for help, Your Majesty. As soon as he saw King Bradler, Forcas saluted and told him about everything that happened in the Tower of Dusk. What? Grina, the prince of the giant shark clan, had a conflict with Flick of the Tower of Dusk? Bradler was flabbergasted to hear the news. Neither Grina nor Lin Li could be convinced easily. Grina was backed by the giant shark clan, which was one of the 7 hegemons of the Endless Ocean, while Flick had already shown his prowess to the Gilded Kingdom. Both of them were strong-headed, and now that they had gotten into a conflict, it was inevitable that Bradler would have to offend one of them by asking them to compromise. Did Elder Zoomer's persuasion not work at all? Bradler asked with a tinge of hope. If possible, he wouldn't be willing to get involved, and it would be best if the Illuminati could just go on his behalf. However, he knew how unrealistic his idea was because Forcas had already come looking for him, which clearly meant that Elder Zoomer clearly couldn't handle the matter. Indeed, Forcas shook his head with a helpless expression and eagerly said, Your Majesty, you should know that there's no way Teacher can convince them. He just wants both parties to stop fighting. So, Your Majesty, please think of a solution as soon as possible. Otherwise, once the situation goes out of control, they will really get into a brutal fight. There were sanctuary powerhouses in both the Giant Shark Clan and the Tower of Dusk. If they really went all out and fought, the aftershocks alone would be enough to destroy a large city. Of course, the capital of the Gilded Kingdom could not be destroyed so easily. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to dominate the Endless Ocean for so many years. However, even then, there was no way the clashing parties could be given the freedom to do whatever they wanted. Otherwise, the Gilded Kingdom would be greatly embarrassed. Hence, the Gilded Kingdom had to intervene. Otherwise, they would only be insulted again. However, King Bradler was faced with a difficult choice again, and it was almost impossible to stay in a neutral position, because that would offend both parties. Hence, he had to pick a side to stand on. He would either offend Grina of the Giant Shark Clan, or Flick of the Tower of Dusk. If it had been before the 2 incidents, Bradler would have definitely chosen to stand on the Giant Shark Clan's side. After all, the Tower of Dusk was only one of the forces in the breezy plains, while the Giant Shark Clan was one of the hegemons of the Endless Ocean. In comparison, the Giant Shark Clan could obviously bring more benefits to the Gilded Kingdom, and the Tower of Dusk couldn't compare to them in that aspect. However, things were different now. After receiving Saint Edmund's admonition, Bradler no longer saw Lin Li as a simple person. Bradler quickly came to a decision, and when the person who had been summoned entered, he said, Quick, go ask Prince Monterey to come here. Prince Monterey was Bradler's younger brother, who had always been known as a genius since he'd been a child. Not only was he talented in magic, he was good at handling politics too. After Bradler ascended the throne, Monterey contributed greatly to stabilizing the country and helping the people develop. In the royal court of the Gilded Kingdom, Monterey was on equal ground with the 3rd Chancellor, who helped Bradler reach a balance with the foreign officials led by the ministers. Hence, in Bradler's heart, Prince Monterey had always been trustworthy, and the person who made him feel at ease the most. Previously, Prince Monterey had been patrolling the other sea areas of the Gilded Kingdom, and had only returned to the capital in the past 2 days. After all, as a prince, he couldn't miss the kingdom's founding celebration, regardless of how busy he might be. Bradler told Monterey about the matter regarding the Tower of Dusk a long time ago, including St. Edmund's stand. Hence, Monterey was well aware of what attitude the Gilded Kingdom should have toward the Tower of Dusk. Monterey prioritized the interests of the royal family, while the foreign ministers who were led by the 2 chancellors put the interests of their respective families first. That was precisely the reason that Bradler approached Prince Monterey, and not the 2 chancellors. In front of the gates of the embassy of the Tower of Dusk, in the embassy area, the members of the Tower of Dusk and the Giant Shark Clan were still on standby, ready to fight, while Elder Zoomer was standing in the middle of the 2 sides with his domain world still open. He seemed to be getting ready to deal with a conflict that could erupt at any time, and he looked more nervous than them. Forcas had been away for less than 10 minutes, but Elder Zoomer felt that each and every second was passing very slowly. At the same time, he didn't feel any less worried, as he was afraid that Bradler would send someone unreliable. He knew very well that after the previous incident regarding the royal guards, most of the ministers of the Gilded Kingdom had developed animosity towards the Tower of Dusk. If Bradler really sent a person like that, the matter would probably get worse. While Elder Zoomer was panicking alone, the people of the Tower of Dusk and the giant shark clan remained still because they didn't care what good intentions Elder Zoomer had. Anyway, neither of them would compromise. Although they didn't do anything on the surface for Elder Zoomer's sake, they were arguing with each other, especially the giant shark clan, that was desperately trying to regain their pride. Finally, when everyone was getting a little impatient, they heard the sounds of neat footsteps coming from the direction of the Gilded Kingdom's royal palace. A team of royal guards made a turn at the end of the street and walked over uniformly. The royal guards were composed of infantry guards and cavalrymen, each possessing strength that was above level 15. The ones tagging along at the back were the teams of sword sages and legendary mages. After the royal guards came over, they immediately stood in between the giant shark clan and the Tower of Dusk like Elder Zoomer. Surrounded by the sword sages and legendary mages, Prince ManhwaRecap walked towards Elder Zoomer. "Prince ManhwaRecap, I'm relieved and at ease that His Majesty has sent you," said Elder Zoomer, who finally heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that the visitor was Prince ManhwaRecap. Prince ManhwaRecap was in his early 40s, and his blonde hair was combed neatly. Although he wasn't very tall, he exuded a dignified and stern aura. Hearing Elder Zoomer's words, he smiled and nodded. "Elder Zoomer, please leave the rest to me." Although Elder Zoomer had long wanted to leave this place, he was no longer in a hurry now that Prince ManhwaRecap took over. Besides, he also wanted to see how Prince ManhwaRecap would handle the matter. If it was different from what he thought, he would have to get involved again. Seeing that Prince ManhwaRecap had arrived, Grina restrained his arrogance a bit and said, "Prince ManhwaRecap, this matter is between us and the Tower of Dusk. It has nothing to do with the Gilded Kingdom. However, considering that this is the capital of the Gilded Kingdom, I think we should inform you beforehand. If we cause any losses later, the giant shark clan will definitely compensate you for it." What Grina meant was very simple. He wanted to solve the problem on the turf of the Gilded Kingdom, and wanted Prince ManhwaRecap to bear witness. Should they end up causing any damages, they would compensate them for it afterwards. He obviously didn't think that the people of the Gilded Kingdom were there to stop him. After all, the Gilded Kingdom had suffered a lot of losses because of the Tower of Dusk, so he made a decision on their behalf without seeking Prince ManhwaRecap's opinion. Prince ManhwaRecap, who had just greeted Elder Zoomer, turned around after hearing Grina's words and said, "Prince Grina, I've already gained an understanding of this matter. Since President Fulik bought those seahorse slaves first, he has the right to do anything he wants with them. It seems a bit inappropriate for you to forcefully demand that the seahorse slaves be given to you." Prince ManhwaRecap's words made all the people of the giant shark clan freeze in shock, while Grina couldn't believe his ears at all. "What, Prince ManhwaRecap, do you mean I'm at fault?" The giant shark clan felt that they were obviously superior to the Tower of Dusk. Is Prince ManhwaRecap out of his mind? How can he offend the prince of the giant shark clan for the sake of defending the Tower of Dusk? Did Prince ManhwaRecap, who has always had a good reputation, receive some benefits from the Tower of Dusk, so he's willing to harm the interests of the Gilded Kingdom? In fact, not to mention the giant shark clan, even the royal guards who followed Prince ManhwaRecap over were also puzzled by Prince ManhwaRecap's behavior. They initially thought that they were going to deal with the Tower of Dusk and teach them a lesson for what they had done previously together with the giant shark clan. However, no one expected Prince ManhwaRecap to defend the person whom the Gilded Kingdom should be hating the most at the expense of offending the prince of the giant shark clan. On the contrary, Elder Zoomer finally heaved a sigh of relief after hearing Prince ManhwaRecap's words. If Prince ManhwaRecap tried to take this opportunity to restore the lost pride of the Gilded Kingdom, like the war-supporting ministers wanted to, Elder Zoomer would have no choice but to ask Saint Edmund to intervene. The expressions of the people of the Tower of Dusk remained unchanged, as if Prince ManhwaRecap was doing what was rightfully expected of him. In their opinion, even if the Gilded Kingdom did not come forward, they wouldn't possibly suffer big losses. In that case, Prince ManhwaRecap's approach was quite insignificant to them. However, Conoris, who had just been through an intense battle, immediately looked displeased. Of course, although Conoris would like to fight with the giant shark clan, he wasn't an unreasonable person, after all. Even if things didn't go his way, he wouldn't say much. After all, the Tower of Dusk could be fearless, facing provocation and going to war, but they wouldn't do something so unreasonable as creating trouble out of nothing even if they were vengeful. At the end of the day, the previous two incidents arose because the Gilded Kingdom was at fault, and Lin Li merely resolved the issue based on his own wishes. Now, the Gilded Kingdom was obviously being biased towards the Tower of Dusk, and although the members of the Tower of Dusk felt that it was a little unnecessary, they wouldn't blame them for it. Hence, Conoris landed back on the ground and stared at the people of the giant shark clan coldly with folded arms. Despite feeling displeased, he didn't say anything provocative anymore. Norfaller was still hidden in the space, and didn't show up at this time, or show a single trace of killing intent. Who knew if the prince of the giant shark clan would let the matter rest for the sake of the Gilded Kingdom or not? They might still have a fight at the end of the day. At this moment, Prince ManhwaRecap was glaring at Grina, who was quite angered. With a smile, the former said, "Prince Grina, you've misunderstood. I'm not saying that you've done something wrong. Everyone knows that the giant shark clan has always been straightforward, and will do whatever they want spontaneously. Unlike us, you don't beat around the bush all the time. However, this is not the Red Sea, and we have a proper code of conduct here. Since you guys are here as guests, please abide by our rules." Although Prince ManhwaRecap's words were polite, and he sugarcoated the recklessness of the giant shark clan as straightforwardness, he didn't give the giant shark clan any leeway. Instead, he told them straight to follow the rules of the Gilded Kingdom. The giant shark clan might be very powerful among the sea clans, but the Gilded Kingdom was not to be controlled by others. In terms of strength, they might not be inferior to the giant shark clan. Hence, Prince ManhwaRecap was not afraid of angering them. Grina might be arrogant, but he wasn't a fool, so he could naturally tell what Prince ManhwaRecap meant. He kept his beady eyes fixed on Prince ManhwaRecap with a cold gaze, and hostilely said, "Prince ManhwaRecap, does King Bradler know that you're here?" Grina also suspected that Prince ManhwaRecap might have received some benefits from the Tower of Dusk, because there was no other reason to explain his behavior. The Gilded Kingdom had suffered lots of losses because of the Tower of Dusk, and got humiliated by them thoroughly. Yet, they were holding themselves cheap by defending the Tower of Dusk. Prince ManhwaRecap was not angered by Grina's suspicions, and he still looked as noble as ever. He calmly said, "President Philip of the Tower of Dusk is a guest of the Gilded Kingdom. If our guests were offended, it'd be our negligence as the hosts. So, Prince Grina, please don't make things hard for us. If you have any objections, you may complain to His Majesty, but please leave with your men for the time being." As Prince ManhwaRecap said that, the palace guards that came along with him also immediately got into formation to guard against the people of the giant shark clan. Although Grina and the people of the giant shark clan didn't take the strength of the palace guards seriously, they would be completely falling out with the Gilded Kingdom if they fought the latter. No matter how arrogant Grina was, he had to consider the consequences. After all, he couldn't be completely nonchalant about his relationship with the Gilded Kingdom like Lin Li. "Okay, Prince ManhwaRecap, I'll do you a favor today." Grina was, of course, feeling indignant and reluctant because he had not only failed to obtain the seahorse slaves, he even ended up embarrassing himself in public. There was no way he could stomach it easily. However, there was nothing he could do. Just as Prince ManhwaRecap said, they were on the turf of the Gilded Kingdom, and not in the Crimson Sea, where the giant shark clan was. The prince of the giant shark clan was not the master here, so how could he really fall out with the Gilded Kingdom? However, Grina did not intend to just forget this matter. Since he couldn't convince Prince ManhwaRecap, he could go straight to King Bradler and talk to him about this matter. The giant shark clan needed the Gilded Kingdom as an ally and vice versa. Grina believed that Bradler wouldn't choose to give up the friendly relations between the kingdom and the giant shark clan for the sake of the tiny Tower of Dusk. Grina looked at the people of the Gilded Kingdom and the Tower of Dusk, and then at the embassy of the Tower of Dusk in the back. Although the prince didn't get to meet Lin Li this time, he had obviously formed a grudge against the latter. It was no longer an issue of the seahorse slaves, but rather it concerned the pride of the giant shark clan. Grina was the prince of the giant shark clan, yet, he and two of his divine generals were put to shame by the Tower of Dusk. That was not a feud that could be resolved easily. Prince ManhwaRecap was actually feeling quite helpless because he had long heard about how difficult President Philip of the Tower of Dusk was to deal with, and this time, he really had a taste of it himself. In any case, Grina was still the prince of the giant shark clan, and regardless of the reason he insisted on having the seahorse slaves, Prince ManhwaRecap felt that there was no need for Lin Li to refuse to see Grina at all. The fact that Lin Li refused to meet Grina was already extremely disrespectful, let alone getting his subordinates to stop the giant shark clan from entering. President Philip first embarrassed the Gilded Kingdom, and now he's doing the same to the giant shark clan. He must be good at this. After humping coldly, Grina left the embassy of the Tower of Dusk with his subordinates. He decided that he would first head to the Palace Gilded Kingdom to confirm with Bradler if his stand was the same as ManhwaRecap's. If ManhwaRecap was just taking things into his own hands, Grina wouldn't mind making ManhwaRecap his enemy too. After all the people of the giant shark clan left, ManhwaRecap turned to the people of the Tower of Dusk, and said to Conorus and the others, "I originally wanted to meet your president, but it seems that he should be very busy. In this case, I won't trouble you." Although ManhwaRecap resolved the matter for the Tower of Dusk, he also bore great resentment towards Lin Li. If Lin Li hadn't been so adamant, the Gilded Kingdom wouldn't have been forced to make such a tough choice. They were just some seahorse slaves, and the forces of the Endless Ocean had been researching the former for years. Yet, those researching still didn't come to a conclusion, and they didn't know what the slaves could do for the giant shark clan. Anyone would probably be willing to give up a bunch of useless slaves to gain the favor of the giant shark clan. However, Lin Li was unlike ordinary people, because he would rather offend the giant shark clan than swallow his pride. What exactly is that President Fulik thinking? Prince Monterey shook his head helplessly, and he was no longer in the mood to meet Lin Li, so he left the embassy area together with the palace guards. On the other hand, after Grina left the embassy of the Tower of Dusk, he took the 4 divine generals with him to the palace of the Gilded Kingdom, and asked to see King Bradler. After sending Prince Monterey over, Bradler had been waiting in the palace for Monterey to inform him of the outcome. When he heard the report from his subordinates that Grina, the prince of the giant shark clan, had asked to see him, he knew that things should have ended as he had hoped. However, he soon felt troubled again. Although he no longer had to deal with the stubborn President Fulik, Grina wasn't that easy to deal with, either. Of course, Bradler couldn't refuse to meet Grina like Lin Li did. After all, the king's attitude represented the attitude of the Gilded Kingdom. Refusing to meet the prince of the giant shark clan would be akin to declaring war on the giant shark clan. Besides, Bradler knew that Grina had to be extremely displeased at this juncture, and needed him to think of a way to help him vent his dissatisfaction. Otherwise, it would have a bad impact on the relationship between the Gilded Kingdom and the giant shark clan. Soon, under the lead of the palace guards, Grina arrived in front of Bradler alone. When Grina saw Bradler, he bowed to him according to diplomatic etiquette, before eagerly asking, "Your Majesty, there's something that I'd like to ask you about, and I hope to get a clear answer from you. Did you give Prince Monterey the authority to do what he has done today? Is his stand representative of yours?" Grina's tone was a bit blunt, and he seemed to be questioning Bradler as he asked if the other party had given Prince Monterey instructions to act that way today as soon as he met the king. In fact, he already had an answer after simmering down during the journey. However, that made him even more displeased as he thought that him going against the Tower of Dusk was considered standing up for the Gilded Kingdom, yet the Gilded Kingdom came over to stop him. He thought that they were really holding themselves cheap. Bradler could naturally tell how resentful Grina was, but there was nothing he could do. He could only smile calmly and gesture for Grina to sit down. He then said, "Prince Grina, you're the prince of the giant shark clan, and their future leader. Your status is preventing you from doing whatever you want. I believe that you've gained a slight understanding of the Tower of Dusk's power just now, but that's only a small portion of it. So what? A mere Tower of Dusk can't do anything to me, even if they go all out. I heard that the Tower of Dusk doesn't quite get along with the Gilded Kingdom, either. You may be able to tolerate their disrespectful attitude, or maybe you have other plans in mind, which I can't interfere with as an outsider. However, I can't tolerate the contempt that he has for the giant shark clan. So, I hope you can give me an explanation as to why you allowed Prince Monterey to do that," Grina said assertively with great displeasure, as he revealed how the Tower of Dusk had been disrespectful to them. One should not rub salt into others' wounds and remind them of their unhappy past, but that was exactly what Grina was doing to Bradler. Bradler initially planned to persuade Grina not to provoke the Tower of Dusk, but he didn't expect Grina to be that ignorant. His face immediately became a little sullen, and he indifferently said, "Prince Grina, you just need to know that I'm doing this not for the Tower of Dusk, but for you. Okay, regardless of whether you understand my intentions or not, that's all I can say." Bradler's retort could be considered a cue for Grina to leave. After hearing those words, Grina immediately regretted his behavior, and when he heard that Bradler no longer wanted to talk about this, he had no choice but to stand up and leave in displeasure. Grina did not believe that Bradler was really helping him as the other party claimed. However, he had some concerns, after all, so he didn't want to fall out with the Gilded Kingdom here. Even though the seahorse slaves were very important to him, he couldn't reveal the reason why, so he could only let it go for now. However, he had already decided that once he had an opportunity to meet with the Tower of Dusk again, he would definitely settle scores with them. Grina left the palace in a huff, and was ready to take his subordinates back to the Red Sea Palace of the Giant Shark Clan, which was outside the city. However, before he could go far, he heard someone shouting at him. He turned around, only to see that it was Cantori, the elite of the younger generation of the Gilded Kingdom. Cantori was close to Harquis, the prince of the Octopus clan, who did not have much interaction with Grina. However, Grina had some ties with Cantori. In short, Cantori and Harquis didn't have many mutual friends, but there wasn't much conflict, either, because it was just making friends. Hence, although Grina was enraged, he nevertheless stopped and looked at Cantori. He said, "Oh, it's you. Why don't I see you and that soft-bodied organism going round spilling ink today. Grina was actually referring to Harquis and the octopus clan with that derogatory term. It was just like how the octopus clan called the giant shark clan eyeless creatures, because of their beady eyes that didn't seem to match their tall and burly bodies. Drawing maggots was the forte of the octopus clan, who seemed to be the scholars of the sea clans. On the other hand, the giant shark clan dominated the sea because of their natural strength. Hence, they could be considered the martial artists of the sea clans. Scholars and martial artists had always been rivals by nature, be it among humans or the sea clans. Kantori smiled and ignored Grina's words. Instead, he walked towards him and said, "Grina, I've heard about what happened today." As soon as he heard Kantori's words, Grina's face immediately turned sullen. One should not insult others with something that would rake up their unhappy past. What happened today was quite humiliating for Grina, and now that Kantori suddenly mentioned this matter, it was blatantly rubbing salt into his wound. Grina was extremely displeased when he left the palace today, and now his mood worsened. He immediately snapped, "Kantori, are you here to make fun of me?" Kantori quickly waved his hand and stopped smiling. "Please don't be mistaken, I'm in no place to do that to you. You probably have no idea that I've experienced the haughtiness and arrogance of that President Fulik more than you have." Grina was ready to fall out with Kantori, but after hearing his words, he couldn't help but be stunned as he sized up Kantori and said, "You mean those two incidents that happened in the Gilded Kingdom? Since your king doesn't even care, what does it have to do with you?" The Shark Prince was naturally referring to the attacks suffered by the Fifth Fleet and the royal guards of the Gilded Kingdom, which could definitely be considered disgraceful events for the Gilded Kingdom. However, the one who was truly humiliated was King Bradler, even though Kantori had a high status too. "You probably don't know that Fulik and I have dealt with each other many more times apart from when he was here in the Gilded Kingdom." Kantori shook his head and then told Bradler about how rude Lin Li was during the negotiation. However, he didn't talk about the matter regarding Cage Island, because that concerned a massive amount of his wealth, after all. After listening to Kantori's account, Grina immediately felt as if they were on the same boat, and his expression was less hostile. He said, "Oh, I see. I really wonder what Bradler is thinking. How can he put up with such a person again and again? Ultimately, His Majesty has to consider the interests of the entire kingdom, so there are some things that he can't do even if he wants to." Kantori sighed as if he understood perfectly. He had already told Grina what the so-called Gilded Kingdom's interests were, and that was to expand to the breezy plains without waging a war. That made Grina somewhat puzzled because according to what Kantori said, killing Lin Li would allow the Gilded Kingdom to do just what they wanted and reap the benefits from it. There was no reason for him to stop Grina. At the thought of this, Grina brought Kantori out of the city towards the Red Sea Palace. Along the way, he asked, "Since that's the case, wouldn't you guys get to expand to the breezy plains freely without any hindrance if we helped you get rid of Fulik? But this is the Gilded Kingdom, and they are His Majesty's guests. If something happens to them here, the reputation of the Gilded Kingdom will definitely be affected. When the time comes, not only will the forces of the breezy plains lose trust in the Gilded Kingdom, they will even make a big deal out of this." Kantori sighed helplessly, but he had given Grina a hint that the Gilded Kingdom wouldn't stop him from dealing with the people of the Tower of Dusk as long as he chose to do it in the right place. Kantori had initially wanted Harquis to help him deal with Lin Li, and thus had brought him to the secret merchant market. However, even though he could not figure out what exactly had happened, he still had a vague feeling that Harquis seemed to be deliberately trying to avoid Lin Li. While Kantori was feeling puzzled, he happened to hear what happened in front of the entrance of the Tower of Dusk's embassy, which was a pleasant surprise to him. Regardless of what was going on with Harquis, he understood Grina well, and knew that the latter was definitely not the type who would be willing to suffer any losses. Hence, Kantori immediately put aside the matter regarding Harquis for the time being, and rushed over to chat with Grina. If Harquis really had any qualms about dealing with Lin Li, Kantori thought that Grina could be the perfect replacement for Harquis, and teach Lin Li a hard lesson on his behalf. If he was overly sensitive and got the wrong idea about Harquis, it wouldn't be a bad thing to give Lin Li an additional opponent, either. Kantori and Grina headed to the Red Sea Palace of the Giant Shark Clan, but Kantori just left when they were about to arrive. They were the only ones who knew what their conversation was about during the journey. On the other hand, the people at the embassy of the Tower of Dusk all resumed their respective duties as if nothing had happened. Lin Li didn't pay attention to what Dork said except for the conclusion. Afterwards, he continued to take out the items that he had bought from the secret merchant market. The most useful items that he had bought from the secret merchant market were the nether pearls and the King Hunter's blade. The nether pearls had already been delivered back to the Tower of Dusk, while the King Hunter's blade was given to Norfaller. The other items, such as some rare deep-sea herbs, would have to be processed before they could be of use to Lin Li. Although they had been processed by the secret merchants using some basic procedures, Lin Li felt that they weren't finely processed enough, so he had to do something more to them to best preserve the power of the herbs. In addition to processing those items, Lin Li also had to help Angelano modify the alchemy colossus in order to maximize the power of the divine sea pillar. Although the alchemy colossus was said to be able to move freely in the ocean as long as the divine sea pillar was placed on it, the effects were only kinetic. It was just like how a log could float on water, but not become a battleship. Angelano was a guru of alchemy, and he also had a rich knowledge of alchemy arrays, but he still needed the help of Lin Li, the guru of inscription, in order to fully exert the power of the divine sea pillar. Lin Li was very glad to do that, though Angelano was timid and so afraid of death that he usually wouldn't take the initiative to participate in any fights. When it was time for him to really participate in the battle, it meant that the situation had reached a critical point more likely than not. Hence, it would be a good thing if the power of the alchemy colossus could be strengthened, as it would provide some help during a battle, or even play a key role. In addition to helping Angelano modify the alchemy colossus, Lin Li also had to help Connor's research the two light-winged angels. Although those winged angels couldn't allow Connor's strength to be improved directly, the life forms could provide some reference for Connors to better understand how to master his perfect body. However, Lin Li had imprisoned the light-winged angels in his domain world, and they couldn't be released at will. Those two light-winged angels were also at the peak of the sanctuary realm, and were only subdued by Lin Li because they were in his domain world. Hence, if he released them now, he wouldn't be able to pull them back into the domain world again. Hence, if Connors wanted to study the light-winged angels, he would have to ask Lin Li to expand his domain world and allow him to enter to conduct his research. Of course, while Connors was studying the light-winged angels, Lin Li would gain something out of it too. If he could get a clear idea of the life form the light-winged angels were, he would be able to create similar existences in his domain world, and they'd be different from the angels of light and dark, which were purely energy bodies that he had previously created. Thus, Lin Li didn't really slacken or idle about. Even though he wasn't studying the divine smith level mage, he spent his time modifying the alchemy colossus, studying the light-winged angels, and processing those herbs and other precious materials. Day by day, time flew by like an arrow. In the blink of an eye, a few days passed, and the Grand Decennial Sea Market finally officially began. The Foreign Affairs Minister of the Gilded Kingdom sent an exquisite and beautiful invitation card to the Tower of Dusk to invite Lin Li to an auction that was to be held a few days later. It was an opening auction for the sea market, and was one of the largest ever. Before the auction began, some auction items would be put on display like an art exhibition, so everyone could admire the auction items. However, not all the auction items would be put on display, and only those that were valuable enough would be included. The finale item would also be kept secret from the guests prior to the auction in order to maintain a sense of mystery. One of the main roles of this exhibition was to allow the guests who were planning to attend the auction to find out more information about the auction items in advance so that they could decide which ones they wanted to bid for. Of course, another purpose of it was to allow them to prepare enough gold coins. To put it nicely, it was to prevent them from missing out on what they really wanted to buy due to insufficient gold coins. However, for the organizers, it was for the sake of pushing the prices of auction items higher. There were two ways to participate in the exhibition. One was through an invitation, while the other was through purchasing a ticket, which cost a bomb. After all, the auction items were very expensive and valuable, so not just anyone could be allowed to enter. After receiving the invitation, Lin Li took some time out of his schedule to take a look at the auction items with some of his subordinates. The auction was indeed worthy of being the opening auction for the sea market. There was not only a large number of auction items, but the quality of the items was also considered exotic. However, the magic scroll that Lin Li had put up for auction was not present. On the one hand, the magic scroll could not be presented visually like magical equipment, and when put on display, it would look just like a simple roll of animal hide. On the other hand, the scroll was created by Lin Li after he studied the Divine Smith level Mageth and contained a trace of the power of the Divine Smith level. Its value was probably not inferior to that of any of the exotic treasures there. Of course, Lin Li couldn't rule out the fact the auctioneer had poor judgment and treated Lin Li's magic scroll as an item of low value, thus classifying it under the category of items that were not worthy of being displayed. However, Lin Li wasn't bothered by it, because he wasn't short of that money anyway. If someone were to buy it at a cheap price, that person would be considered very lucky. He was merely patronizing the Gilded Kingdom by putting up such a magic scroll for auction. After all, there was no need for him to be so petty, since the Gilded Kingdom had taken the initiative to be kind to him. Lin Li took a tour around the exhibition, and he basically had a rough idea about the auction items. Hence, he stopped thinking about the other things. At the same time, Bradler was also listening to the reports of some officials in the palace of the Gilded Kingdom. What? It's not displayed in the exhibition? Bradler asked as he couldn't help but frown. The official bowed, and respectfully said, "Yes, Your Majesty, I took a careful look at every corner of the exhibition hall, but I didn't see the magic scroll that President Fulik brought over." Bradler sighed, and after a moment of silence, he said, "It's a good thing that it wasn't included in the exhibition. Otherwise, if the value of that item is exposed, it'll probably lead to more trouble, and who knows what that petty Fulik might do again. The best things would not be put up for display at the exhibition, but neither would those that were of extremely low value." He didn't think that Lin Li would offer any real treasures, since it wasn't the best item, and it wasn't included in the exhibition. Bradler thought that it had to be because its value was too low. Bradler's concerns were not uncalled for. If an item that was clearly of low value was placed together with other exotic treasures, the owners of the other auction items would probably be displeased, while the petty Fulik would treat it as an insult to him. Such a situation was also considered a good thing for Bradler. Anyway, no one would know the true value of the magic scroll, so no one would suspect him when he bid for it with a large amount of money. Others might even think that it was a treasure. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye, and the grand opening ceremony of the sea market, as well as a series of celebratory activities began. The sea market was not only related to the merchants. As the sea market opened, a large number of circus troupes from around the world, as well as a variety of renowned performer groups, would go to the sea market to boost the festive mood. Although those thrilling and exciting performances were not worth mentioning at all to those who were powerful enough, the ordinary people of this world were in fact similar to the people of the world Lin Li belonged to before he transmigrated. Many things were incredible to them, such as acrobatics and beast taming or some bizarre creatures, which were very popular among commoners and even more appealing than the auction. In addition, there were also performances such as singing, dancing, and theatrical acts, which were the favorite of the nobles of various countries, mages, and other professions. Besides, there were also celebrities who were good at singing, dancing, and acting in theater dramas in this world. Legend had it that there was once a theater star, who was just an ordinary person, but had a long list of suitors who were all legendary powerhouses. She could also be called a role model for the others, who were in the same profession as her. In addition to those art performances, there was also another kind of performance that almost all people enjoyed, and that was the brutal gladiatorial performance that often involved bloodshed. In fact, not to mention the people of this era, even the high elves were passionate about the gladiatorial competitions, so much that they even created countless things specially for the gladiatorial competitions. Examples included the battle formations that many forces used in the Tower of Death that was specially used for the training of gladiators. Of course, since there were gladiatorial competitions, there was no lack of gambling and bets. In fact, the exciting bloodshed of the gladiatorial competitions was only one aspect that contributed to its strong appeal. The other aspect that was attractive to them was that there were often many bets on the gladiatorial competitions. It seemed that gambling was part of the nature of intelligent races, and even the elves who claimed to believe in nature were no exception. Hence, after the official opening of the sea market, the nobles and commoners were all still in the festive mood that permeated the entire capital of the Gilded Kingdom. In fact, even the entire Four Seasons Island was brimming with a festive mood. Of course, there was another important reason for it. The founding celebration would be happening soon. The founding celebration was actually the true celebratory festival of all people in the Gilded Kingdom. The Gilded Kingdom would be holding a series of activities during the founding celebration, such as a worship ritual to the ancestors, a military parade to show the strength of the military, holidays for the people, and an amnesty. Although Lin Li was a sanctuary realm powerhouse, he had transmigrated to this world only a few years ago. Hence, during these few days, he ate and drank to his heart's content, watched the circus performances, enjoyed the singing and dancing, forced himself to act like he was moved to tears for some theater dramas, and acted just like an ordinary person. After 2 days of unwinding and relaxing, it was finally the day of the auction which Lin Li had been invited to. When Lin Li was about to set off to the auction venue with Conoris, Elder Zoomer also brought his disciple Forcus, as well as Prince Manhwa, who resolved the conflict between the Giant Shark clan and the Tower of Dusk the other day, to the embassy of the Tower of Dusk. After exchanging some greetings, Elder Zoomer introduced Prince Manhwa to Lin Li, and also mentioned the previous incident. "President Fulik, let me introduce, this is Prince Manhwa, who intervened the other day to deter those people from the Giant Shark clan who tried to disturb you." The Illuminati and the royal family of the Gilded Kingdom were relatively similar in terms of their attitude towards Lin Li. Hence, Elder Zoomer brought up the incident that took place a few days ago in hopes that he could impress Lin Li. Having interacted with Lin Li for such a long time, Elder Zoomer was already well aware that Lin Li would respect those who showed him due respect. Putting aside the nonsensical matters, he was actually quite a nice person. In fact, although Lin Li hadn't stepped in previously, he had still detected the changes outside with his mental strength. Hence, Lin Li didn't show Monterey any hostility, and instead said with a calm smile, "Nice to meet you, Prince Monterey." Lin Li did not deliberately show any extreme enthusiasm just because of Monterey's identity. Instead, he remained calm as if Monterey was any other stranger he was meeting for the first time. He would probably react the same way even if Elder Zoomer introduced a farmer to him now. However, his attitude seemed aloof in Monterey's opinion. In terms of fame, Prince Monterey was not inferior to both the prime ministers of the Gilded Kingdom. In fact, he also had a very good reputation among the commoners because he had increased the prestige of the royals. If it was someone else, they would probably be more or less enthusiastic about meeting Monterey for the first time. However, during the period of time that Prince Monterey had been back, he already gained some understanding of Lin Li, so he wasn't bothered by Lin Li's attitude. He simply said with a smile, "I've actually wanted to get to know you a long time ago, President Felix. However, you weren't free previously, so I chose not to disturb you. It's a great honor that I got to see you today." "You're being too polite, Prince Monterey." "May I know why the two of you are here to see me?" asked Lin Li, who was about to go attend the auction. Although he guessed that Monterey and Elder Zoomer had probably come to see him because of something related to the auction, he nevertheless asked that question. President Felix, you should be going to attend the auction, right?" "May I join you?" Prince Monterey asked, lowering his status. He didn't put on airs and act all lofty like many princes would. That was actually quite difficult for a noble. It would be rude to be hostile to a person who had a friendly attitude. Lin Li was not an unreasonable person, after all, and he didn't show any hostility to Monterey. Besides, the previous two conflicts Lin Li had with the Gilded Kingdom arose because Lin Li humiliated them. There was no point in harping on it and being mean to Monterey. Besides, Lin Li also needed someone who was familiar with the various forces of the Endless Ocean. Hence, he nodded accommodatingly and agreed, "All right, I'll have to trouble you then, Prince Monterey." Seeing that Lin Li and Prince Monterey had a rather pleasant conversation, Elder Zoomer, who was at the side, secretly heaved a sigh of relief. "Okay, the auction is about to begin. Why don't we chat as we walk?" Thus, they left the embassy and walked slowly towards the auction venue. Along the way, they exchanged many meaningless pleasantries. Since the auction was the opening show of the sea market, the venue that they had chosen was naturally not a random place. It was held in a magnificent building near the palace, second only to the palace itself. It was the largest art exhibition hall of the Gilded Kingdom, where many precious and exquisite artworks were usually put on display. At this moment, the art exhibition hall had already been redecorated as the venue of the grand auction. The world was not purely about violence and war. After years of evolution, there were also countless people who were in an endless pursuit of art, and for that reason, countless artists created artistic treasures that shone brightly like stars. These dazzling treasures decorated the cruel Anral, like wild flowers blooming in the brutal jungle, where it was all about the survival of the fittest. In this world, art served many other purposes besides providing an aesthetic visual pleasure to the people. In many myths of Anral, there were various stories of people who became powerful through art and also various legends about people who reached the level of the divine smith and became a deity of a certain field. For example, the god of painting in myths was said to be able to draw everything in the world with a single brush. Each painting created by the god of painting would be a world, and he could change the real world with a single stroke of the brush by turning ordinary mountains into erupting volcanoes, making the sea hang upside down in the sky, and causing the land to collapse and crumble in an instant. Of course, those who were in a real pursuit of art would not be bothered if art could give them powerful combat force, and they simply yearned to reach the pinnacle of the field of art. Perhaps it was this very pursuit that allowed them to have a clearer understanding of the world, but the artwork that they created usually contained a certain world law, which wasn't intentional. Hence, such artworks were often extremely sought after by people who hoped to experience the mystery of those artworks. A true masterpiece was often more popular than powerful magical equipment in the auction house. After all, no matter how powerful magical equipment might be, it was still an external object of the world. Meanwhile, if one could comprehend the mystery of the laws from an art masterpiece, it would allow them to improve their realm. The Gilded Kingdom was founded in the early Dark Age, and thus they had hardly experienced destructive wars. As such, Many pieces of precious artworks were perfectly preserved. Although this art exhibition hall was temporarily used as the auction venue, many precious artworks were still showcased in the exhibition hall for the visual enjoyment of the guests who were there to attend the auction. Besides, it was said that the Gilded Kingdom had also put up several master-level art pieces for auction this time. Of course, the Gilded Kingdom wasn't in need of money, but rather they were just trying to promote the auction by doing so. When Lin Li arrived at the auction venue, the auction had yet to officially begin, so he began admiring the artworks in the exhibition hall in the company of Prince ManhwaRecap, who explained the origins of the artwork. He even introduced each piece that was on display without any impatience. Lin Li and the rest were not the only ones in the art exhibition hall. There were also many guests who had arrived in advance to wait for the auction to begin, and were now appreciating the exquisite and fine pieces of art in the hall. Fortunately, the exhibition hall was large enough, with a floor area of tens of thousands of square meters. Thus, even though there were many guests, it still made the place look quiet and spacious. Lin Li didn't quite appreciate the so-called art in the beginning, as art was purely aesthetic and useless to him. However, as a sanctuary powerhouse whose mastery of the world laws had reached a very high level, the artworks were now a combination of various laws to him. The more intricate and ingenious the structure of those laws, the more perfect and beautiful they tended to be. In fact, in some ways, those artworks shared many similarities to the magoths that Lin Li drew. Perfect magoths could also be called artworks. However, those artworks presented the laws in ways that were more easily accepted by the public, while magoths were a straightforward and the simplest presentation of the laws. Although Lin Li was already a high-level sanctuary powerhouse, and a guru of inscription who was near the level of the divine smith, and whose mastery of the world laws was probably far greater than that of the masters who created these artworks, there were still lots of things that Lin Li could learn from the artworks. In particular, the amazing structure of the laws contained the wonderful thoughts of countless masters of art that gave Lin Li a lot of inspiration. In addition to accompanying Lin Li to appreciate the art pieces and explaining their origins along with the legends that revolved around each of them, ManhwaRecap also introduced Lin Li to some guests they met along the way. The guests in this exhibition hall were all invited to the auction, so that meant that their status and identities were naturally extraordinary. They were all bigwigs of various forces. President Flick, let me introduce. This is Prince Falth, and this is Grand Elder Lanric, both of whom are from the Sea Serpent clan. The Sea Serpent clan is one of the 7 overlords of the Endless Ocean, and Prince Falth is the most outstanding genius of the Sea Serpent clan in the past thousands of years. He will definitely lead the Sea Serpent clan to a prosperous development in the future. Standing in front of a painting of the sunrise at sea, ManhwaRecap introduced the few Sea Serpent clansmen who had long necks to Lin Li. The most distinct feature of the Sea Serpent clansmen was their long necks and gaunt bodies. When they walked, they looked like they didn't have any bones at all, and their faces were covered in dense scales, while their eyes were emitting cold and sinister rays of light. The warriors of the Sea Serpent clan did not have the strength of the giant shark knights, and their forte was their agility. The most impressive trait about them was the deadly toxins that their bodies produced. When applied to weapons, the toxins would cause their weapons to become more lethal. When they were sprayed like poisonous fog, anyone that came into contact with the fog would suffer from skin erosion and eventually die. It was extremely deadly and vicious. However, although the Sea Serpent clan was one of the 7 overlords of the Endless Ocean, their strength was actually ranked at the bottom. Their deadly toxins may be insidious, but they would be effective only when it came into contact with the bodies of the enemies. The Thunder Eel clan could be considered their nemesis. Also, although the giant shark knights mainly engaged in close combat, their massive power and strength usually prevented the Sea Serpent warriors from getting close to them. Of course, even so, the Sea Serpent clan could be considered a massive force in the Endless Ocean. They dominated the Desolate Sea, which was the sea region with the most complex terrain in the entire Endless Ocean. There were lots of trenches of various sizes and depths all over the seabed. Although it was impossible for them to develop and expand outwards due to their terrain, they had a great advantage in defense, so no one was willing to harbor any ill intentions towards them. The Desolate Sea was a neighboring sea of the Gilded Kingdom, and the Sea Serpent clan didn't have the ability to expand outwards. Thus, the Gilded Kingdom and the Sea Serpent clan got along quite well. Falth, the prince of the Sea Serpent clan, whom ManhwaRecap introduced to Lin Li, had actually begun to gradually gain more power, and probably would become the great monarch soon. However, ManhwaRecap was purely just trying to flatter Falth by calling him the clan's greatest genius to appear in the past thousands of years. In fact, Falth's strength was only about level 24. Of course, Lin Li didn't care about the other party's strength when it came to making friends. As long as he could hit it off well with them, he would be willing to become good friends with ordinary people too. However, if he couldn't get along with them, Lin Li wouldn't bother paying any attention to them, even if they were a sanctuary powerhouse, or even a so-called deity. When ManhwaRecap was introducing Falth to Lin Li, Falth also seemed a little interested at first. After all, with Prince Monterey's status in the Gilded Kingdom, those who were worthy enough to be introduced by him to others should be people of an equal status as ManhwaRecap. However, after he heard Monterey's introduction, that Lin Li was just the president of a small and nameless force in the breezy plains, Falth's expression became much more aloof and indifferent. After having a brief conversation with them out of courtesy, Falth left together with that grand elder. He seemed to be completely uninterested in talking to Lin Li. Falth's behavior made Prince ManhwaRecap more or less embarrassed, but Lin Li did not care in the slightest. Instead, he turned around and continued to admire the painting of the sun hanging above the sea during sunrise. After Lin Li looked at the artworks for a few more minutes, there was suddenly a small commotion in the initially quiet exhibition hall. Lin Li couldn't help but turn to look in the direction of the noise, only to see that a bunch of people seemed to have gotten into a dispute. One of the parties involved was someone Lin Li knew, Harquis of the Octopus clan, while the other was someone from the Sea clan, who was wearing a magic robe. Seeing that Lin Li was looking over there, Prince ManhwaRecap immediately walked over and took a look too. He then introduced, "Those with tentacles on their necks are the people of the Octopus clan, who are led by their prince, Harquis. The Octopus clan are natural-born inscribers, and rumor has it that Harquis has already become a master of inscription. Those who are arguing with them look similar to the Sea Serpent clan, but they're actually from the Thunder Eel clan. Their leader is Manson, the prince of the Thunder Eel clan. The Thunder Eel clan are thunder mages of the Sea clan, who are born with the power to manipulate lightning, and their strength is second only to the giant shark clans among the 7 overlords of the sea." The appearance of the Thunder Eel people was indeed somewhat similar to the sea serpents, as their necks were much longer than that of humans. However, there were gills on both sides of the neck of the Thunder Eels that seemed to be opening and closing slightly. They were also emitting lightning fluctuations from their bodies. The prince of the Thunder Eel clan, Manson, was about the same age as Harquis. However, he had already reached the sanctuary realm. The Mage Legion of the Thunder Eel clan could be considered the only force in the endless ocean that could compete head-on with the giant shark knights. The Siren clan might not be weak, but they were constrained by their lack of manpower. However, the Thunder Eel clan was different because they had tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of Thunder Eel mages. If all of them were casting lightning magic spells at the same time, the entire sea would probably become a pool of lightning. Not to mention the Sea clan's troops, even sanctuary powerhouses would end up getting battered badly by the Thunder Eel clan. The Thunder Eel clan actually shared a good relationship with the Octopus clan, but Manson and Harquis would fight whenever they met. Both of them were geniuses of their respective clans. Having reached the sanctuary realm a long time ago, Manson naturally didn't care much about the legendary level Harquis. On the other hand, Harquis was proud of his attainments in inscription, so he was naturally extremely dissatisfied with Manson's contemptuous attitude. ManhwaRecap suggested that he bring Lin Li over and introduce him to Manson and Harquis, but Lin Li wasn't interested at all. The reason for the dispute between Manson and Harquis was their arrogant personalities. Hence, Lin Li didn't want to waste his time on doing something that wouldn't bring him any benefits. Seeing Lin Li's lack of interest, ManhwaRecap did not say anything further, and instead continued to accompany Lin Li to appreciate the artworks. After looking at a few, Lin Li suddenly stopped in front of a painting which was nearly 10 meters long and 5 or 6 meters wide. It should be considered a relatively large painting in this hall. It was a painting of the shadow of a battleship that was sailing into the distance under the setting sun. Perhaps the painting would be ordinary, and nothing more than a visual pleasure for most people, but Lin Li had a different feeling about it, because the blurry shadow of the battleship actually shared some resemblance with the star that Garesco's incarnation had left behind. Of course, it was just a blurry shadow of a battleship, after all, and Lin Li couldn't be certain that it was the star. However, if that was all, it might not even be worth it for Lin Li to stop and take a second glance at it. Even if he was certain that the ship which the shadow belonged to was really the star, the resemblance was not particularly significant. The real reason Lin Li stopped was that the aura of the painting made him feel a strange sense of familiarity. After sensing it carefully, he discovered that the aura was surprisingly very similar to that of the Divine Smith level Mageth that he had been studying recently. In other words, the structure of the laws used on this painting seemed to have some similarity with the Divine Smith level Mageth that the Immortal King had left behind on the 7 small islands. However, Lin Li was certain that the painting was definitely not created by the Immortal King, because the structure wasn't fine enough. It would seem more plausible if it was said to be created by the Immortal King's student. What's this painting about? Lin Li looked at the information in the introduction to see that the creator of the painting was named Heldanos, but he had never heard of that name before. Hence, he turned to ask Prince ManhwaRecap about it. Based on the painting alone, Lin Li could tell that Heldanos definitely had high attainments in inscription, which were probably higher than his. He reckoned that many inhabitants of the endless ocean should be aware of such a capable person. Indeed, after taking a look at the painting, Prince ManhwaRecap smiled and said, "This painting is a gift that the Octopus clan gave us during the founding celebration of the Gilded Kingdom 100 years ago. It's said that the painter of this painting is Heldanos, an extraordinary and legendary figure of the Octopus clan, who has extremely high attainments in the field of inscription. So, even though it's just a painting, it's a very valuable collectible." Lin Li realized that Prince ManhwaRecap talked about a collectible. For ordinary people, such an exquisite piece of artwork was indeed a collectible. However, those who had the ability to sense the laws in the painting at a deeper level would feel that it was far beyond just a piece of art. The painting contained plenty of the creator's experience and comprehension of inscription. Instead of calling it a painting, it would be more appropriate to call it Heldanos' notebook of inscription, or even his legacy. It would then no longer be as simple as a collectible. Those who could understand the painting would definitely obtain massive benefits from it. Although Lin Li's skill in the field of inscription might not be inferior to that of Heldanos, he could still get a lot of inspiration from the painting. Perhaps there were some details that Lin Li had overlooked or neglected, but he managed to find some clues from Heldanos' painting. That was the reason that pharmacists, inscribers, mages, and warriors often got together to exchange information. As the saying went, there would always be someone to learn from among a group of three. Logically speaking, such a work of art should be of great use to the Octopus clan, whose foundation was in inscription. Hence, how could they have given it to the Gilded Kingdom as a gift? Besides, there were also inscribers in the Gilded Kingdom. How could they have not found the arcane mysteries contained in that painting? Yes, this is quite a good painting, and it's a rare piece of art, Lin Li said with a nod, but he didn't mention the more profound details of the painting. Prince ManhwaRecap shot Lin Li a glance, and merely thought that he was just being polite. Hence, he didn't think much of it, and said, "President Flick, do you like paintings too? But this is a gift from the Octopus clan, after all, and it won't be nice for us to give it to someone else. However, there are some pieces that are created by our local master artists which are not inferior to this one. They'll be up for auction this time too." The Gilded Kingdom had really invested a lot of resources into this auction. The artworks displayed in this art exhibition could be considered national treasures. If they were put for sale elsewhere, they would definitely be able to fetch a staggering price that would even be enough to buy a city. However, for Lin Li, the other pieces of art might not be more useful than Heldanos' painting, regardless of how valuable they might be. However, based on ManhwaRecap's words, Lin Li managed to deduce some information. Clearly, to the Gilded Kingdom, Heldanos' painting meant nothing more than just a gift from the Octopus clan. In fact, they didn't value it very much. It was no wonder that that was the case. Actually, on the one hand, they couldn't see the arcane mysteries contained within the painting, and on the other hand, Heldanos might be famous in the Octopus clan, but not necessarily so in the Gilded Kingdom. "Won't this painting be put up for auction?" Lin Li asked, pointing at the painting. He was quite drawn to the painting, and he hoped to get his hands on it, if possible, so that he could study it carefully. After all, it was left behind by a guru of inscription who was on par with him, and Lin Li had just taken a few glances at it. In order to fully see and comprehend everything in the painting, he needed more than just a short while of looking at it. If this painting was put up for auction, Lin Li would definitely buy it at any cost. Unfortunately, it was still a gift from the Octopus clan to the Gilded Kingdom, after all, and gifts as such usually had a great symbolic significance. Even if it was a piece of garbage, they would have to preserve it well. How could they sell it to others so casually? He reckoned that the Gilded Kingdom decided to put the painting on display most likely because of their friendly relations. Although it was said that Lin Li did not have anything against fleecing others to get what he wanted, and was in fact more than glad to do it all the time, it was clearly not a good time to do it now. Hence, he decided that he would wait until the auction was over. Anyway, the painting would still be there after the auction. With a plan in mind, Lin Li stopped studying the painting here, and followed ManhwaRecap to go elsewhere to look at the other artworks. However, no one noticed that ManhwaRecap had secretly turned around to take a glance at the painting after they left, seemingly thinking about something. Time passed quickly when they were appreciating the artworks on display. As they got closer and closer to the start of the auction, the number of people in the exhibition hall increased. Apart from the people of the Thunder Eel clan, the Octopus clan, and the Sea Serpent clan, which were among the 7 overlords of the ocean, Greeno of the Giant Shark clan, and his 4 divine generals were also there at the auction. Immediately afterwards, the Jellyfish clan and the Barbarous Whale clan, which were ranked at the bottom of the 7 overlords, and were limited in strength compared to the Sea Serpent clan, also appeared. The Jellyfish clan was similar to the Octopus clan, and was very talented in the field of pharmaceutics. They could be considered the clan of pharmacists of the sea. The Jellyfish clan got along well with the other clans, and even during the Great Ocean where they still maintained a neutral attitude. Hence, although they weren't very strong, no one dared to harbor ill intentions towards them. Of course, the Jellyfish clan could become one of the 7 overlords of the ocean not purely because they were taken care of by others. The potions they concocted were not only used for recovery and saving others, they also created potions that could be extremely deadly. Legend had it that the Jellyfish clan had an extremely tyrannical potion that would be enough to pollute the entire ocean, turning it into a dead area in the blink of an eye. With such a powerful weapon in hand and a good relationship with each of the overlords of the sea, the Jellyfish clan did not take the initiative to start a conflict with anyone, so naturally no one was willing to provoke them, either. On the other hand, the Barbarous Whale clan was said to have the bloodline of the ancient Barbarous Whale, and they were akin to the Titans of the sea clans. In terms of natural strength, the Giant Shark Knights would never be able to compare to the Barbarous Whale clan. An adult Barbarous Whale could have a height of above 4 meters, and had the ability to smash a mountain peak and make it collapse with a single punch. One Barbarous Whale clan member would be able to contend with 100 Giant Shark Knights. However, the Barbarous Whale clan had a small population, and there were probably less than 20,000 of them in the endless ocean. If their population could surpass 100,000, the endless ocean would probably belong to them. 6 of the 7 overlords of the endless ocean arrived at the auction. Just as the auction was about to begin, there was yet another commotion at the entrance of the exhibition hall. It turned out that the queen of the Siren clan had walked in, surrounded by a group of men. The Sirens were the most good-looking clan of the sea, and their beauty was not subjective to the aesthetic standards of the people who looked at them. For example, dwarves liked females who were as buff and stout as them instead of beautiful and slender women of the human race. However, when they saw the female Sirens, their previous aesthetic standards would be changed immediately. Even beasts that usually liked other female beasts of their own kind wouldn't be able to resist the temptation of female Sirens. That probably had something to do with the natural seductive charm of the Siren clan. The Siren clan was matriarchal, and the supreme leader was not a king like in the other sea clans, but a queen, just like the Elven queen of the mainland. The governing system of the Sirens was similar to that of the elves, and they also adopted the system of having a council and elders. Their gorgeous appearance and system, that was similar to that of the elves, made everyone call the Siren clan the Elves of the Sea. However, many male Sirens were quite hideous, unlike the elves who were all attractive regardless of gender. It wasn't known if the Siren queen Halia was the most beautiful Siren, but the beauty and charm she exuded under her graceful and noble aura made her absolutely breathtaking. In fact, when she appeared in the exhibition hall, all those who saw her immediately fell silent, and it was so quiet in the exhibition hall that even heartbeat could be heard. There was an ugly male Siren beside the Siren queen Halia. Those who were familiar with the Siren clan would know that the male Siren was Halia's husband, the first prince of the Siren clan, Prince Cleve. When the queen's husband was mentioned, people would often associate him with a pretty boy who sponged off his wife. After all, the queen was too domineering, and she would always outshine the people around her. However, Prince Cleve was an absolute exception. All the people of the Endless Ocean knew that he was just as outstanding as Halia. Prince Cleve was definitely not a pretty boy. Of course, he was only so in the eyes of others. In the opinion of those beyond the Sea clan, Cleve's appearance was the complete opposite of Halia's, because he was truly extremely hideous. However, such an awful appearance might be a different kind of aesthetic to the Sirens. Hence, Prince Cleve's appearance was not the key point, but his strength was. In terms of individual strength, Prince Cleve was definitely the first true archer in history to ever reach the peak of the Sanctuary Realm among the Sea clan. Even in the entire Endless Ocean, he was still an absolute powerhouse. It was very difficult for archers to reach the Sanctuary Realm, and martial artists usually adopted the path of self-improvement by turning their bodies into a world. With the power of their strong bodies, they managed to break through realm after realm, turning their physical bodies, that were made of flesh, into immortal bodies. On the other hand, mages comprehended the world laws, and used the power of the world laws for themselves to control the laws and create worlds. However, in order for archers to reach the Sanctuary Realm, they would have to have an equal understanding of the world laws with mages. At the same time, they would also have to temper their bodies like mages. Hence, since ancient times, archers who had reached the Sanctuary Realm were almost few and far between. There were probably less than 5 who could reach the peak of the Sanctuary Realm in the history of Anral. Of course, while contributing more The power that an archer could possess once he reached the sanctuary realm was also very terrifying. Each arrow that Prince Cleve shot could reach a target that was more than 1,000 kilometers away and pierce through the domain world of sanctuary mages. During the Ocean War, Prince Cleve managed to kill countless legendary powerhouses and dozens of sanctuary powerhouses. He was truly a sanctuary realm killer. In addition to massive individual strength, Prince Cleve's military talent was also extremely outstanding. The Siren's powerful army of ocean archers led by Prince Cleve had performed outstandingly in the Great Ocean War. Even the Giant Shark Knights of the Giant Shark Clan and the Thunderbolt Mages of the Thunder Eel Clan were defeated by the Ocean Archers. Prince Cleve's ugliness accentuated Queen Hylia's beauty, and he had also protected the Siren Clan with his power. He and Queen Hylia were just like the sun and the moon of the Sea Clan, and all the Sirens could feel his light shining on them. Their reverence for him was not inferior to that for Queen Hallelujah in any way. The other Sea Clans, including the unbeatable Giant Shark Clan members, were all in awe and respectful when the Siren Clan was mentioned. Hence, when they saw Queen Hylia and Prince Cleve enter, everyone quickly retreated to the sides. No one dared to laugh at Hylia or belittle the ugly Cleve, who was a supreme powerhouse. Most of them did not even have the courage to go forward to greet them. Prince Monterey and Lin Li were standing far away from them. Thus, Monterey whispered to Lin Li the introduction of the two big shots of the Siren Clan, and even asked Lin Li if he wanted to go over and get to know them. Although peak sanctuary realm archers were very rare, Lin Li wasn't that interested in Prince Cleve, because he was now only interested in information related to the Immortal King. Hence, after hearing Prince Monterey's question, Lin Li merely waved his hand and looked away before continuing to admire the art piece beside him. At this moment, Greena of the Giant Shark Clan, Harquis of the Octopus Clan, and some other important figures of the other clans had all come forward to greet the Siren Queen Hylia and Prince Cleve. Even though there were many young and outstanding talents as well as authoritative and esteemed elders, none of them dared to be disrespectful to Hylia and Cleve. Hylia and Cleve returned the bows gracefully and even chatted with those they were familiar with from time to time. Although they were vastly different in terms of appearance, others felt joyous when facing them, and in fact, they even felt that they were valued by Hylia and Cleve. After greeting those people, Hylia and Cleve noticed Prince Monterey, who was standing near them, and thus weaved through the crowd to walk over. Before Hylia and Clifford said anything, Prince Monterey took the initiative to walk towards them and greeted them smilingly. Queen Hylia, Prince Clifford, I didn't expect you two to come here in person this time. You should have informed us in advance. His Majesty would have definitely welcomed you with the grandest ceremony. Prince Monterey, you don't have to be so polite. It was a last-minute decision of ours to come to the Gilded Kingdom. We're just here to shop at the sea market to unwind and relax, so there's no need to engage in such complicated diplomatic etiquette, Prince Cleve said indifferently while shifting his gaze from Prince Monterey to Lin Li, who was admiring the art piece beside him. He asked Prince Monterey, aren't you going to introduce your friend to us? Indeed, birds of a feather do flock together. Prince Monterey should be considered a famous and powerful figure in the Gilded Kingdom, who had talent and strength. His friends should also be similar to him, and it was impossible that he would have friends that were too far off. Hence, when they saw Lin Li, who was beside Lin Li, Hylia and Cleve were both curious, and thus decided to go and find out. Seeing this, Prince Monterey hurriedly called out to Lin Li and introduced him to Prince Cleve and Hylia. This is President Flick of the Tower of Dusk from the Breezy Plains, who's also the fourth arbitrator of the Supreme Council. He's only in his early 20s, but he has already reached the Sanctuary Realm, and he's just as talented as Garesco was back then. Prince Monterey was not stingy with his compliments for Lin Li, and he was singing praises about him to no end. In fact, he was stating facts, but it sounded a little unbelievable to others. Of course, Prince Monterey introduced Lin Li, not simply to gain Lin Li's goodwill, but also to save himself some pride. No matter what, he was still the prince of the Gilded Kingdom, after all, and he couldn't make friends with just anyone. If he merely stated that Lin Li was the president of a small and nameless force, no one would know who he was, but things would be different if Monterey made it clear that Lin Li was also one of the 4 arbitrators of the Supreme Council. Indeed, after hearing Prince Monterey's introduction, Hylia and Cleve couldn't help but be surprised. Lin Li's identity as the 4th arbitrator of the Supreme Council was indeed able to shock others. Others might not have heard of the Tower of Dusk before, but the Supreme Council was one of the forces that were on the pinnacle of Anral. Although there were only 3 sanctuary powerhouses in the Supreme Council, the strength of a force was not determined by the number of sanctuary powerhouses. Otherwise, given the numerous sanctuary powerhouses of the Illuminati, the latter would have long exchanged positions with the Supreme Council. The 3 arbitrators of the Supreme Council, who were at the peak of the Sanctuary Realm, might have already comprehended the mysteries of the divine realm, which was something that ordinary sanctuary powerhouses absolutely could not compare with. However, in this place, the Tower of Dusk might not be less famous than the Supreme Council. The two major incidents that Lin Li had caused since his arrival in the Gilded Kingdom had already become known to all by now. Compared to the Tower of Dusk, the Supreme Council seemed a little distant, and they wouldn't quite think about the two incidents that were caused by the members of the Tower of Dusk here. So you were President Falik, I've heard about you, and I have to say, you're very interesting, Prince Cleve said to Lin Li smilingly. Although his hideous appearance made him seem a little ghastly, his tone was kind and full of goodwill. Queen Halia, who was at the side, remained silent, but her gentle smile made everyone else a little dazed, including Lin Li. However, Lin Li had powerful mental strength, so he had a high resistance and immunity to bewitching spiritual spells. Hence, he came back to his senses in an instant. Of course, Lin Li also knew that Queen Halia didn't have any ill intentions. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to break free from the spell easily. Queen Halia might be a little less powerful than Prince Cleve, who was at the peak of the sanctuary realm, but spiritual spells were always the most difficult to defend against. The actual threat that Queen Halia posed to an enemy during a battle was probably even greater than that Prince Cleve posed. Lin Li knew how he should act around others, and was well aware that he should return friendly gestures. He immediately smiled and said, I can't help it, I'm young and full of vigor. I won't let myself suffer any losses, and I can never change that habit of mine. However, I've also heard a lot about you, Prince Cleve. I'm truly in awe of you. Their friendly exchange consisted of just a few simple pleasantries. After all, they had just met each other. However, in the eyes of many sea people, the Siren Queen Halia and Prince Cleve were legendary figures. Yet they took the initiative to get to know Lin Li, which made the jaws of the people around them drop. In fact, not only could those people of the Sea Clan not figure it out, even Lin Li was a little confused himself. He didn't think that he was a domineering and formidable person. In that case, the behavior of Prince Cleve and Queen Halia was somewhat intriguing. However, if they didn't state the exact reason, there was no way Lin Li could guess it. Hence, he had no choice but to just say a few polite words before watching them leave. Are you Falik? Immediately after the Siren Queen Hallelujah and Prince Cleve left with their subordinates, Grina of the Giant Shark Clan also approached Lin Li and sized him up with a hostile gaze. Although he had long borne a grudge against the Tower of Dusk, it was Grina's first time seeing Lin Li. When Grina asked for the seahorse slaves previously, Lin Li didn't intervene himself at all. He merely sent a few subordinates, who managed to land Grina in a disheveled state. Now that the mastermind was right in front of him, Grina was furious. However, this was the exhibition hall of the Gilded Kingdom, and Lin Li was accompanied by Prince ManhwaRecap of the Gilded Kingdom. Regardless of how arrogant Grina might be, he knew that it wasn't the time to settle scores with Lin Li now. After taking a glance at Grina, Lin Li continued to act like he didn't know Grina at all. He asked, yes, I'm Falik, and you are? Seeing Lin Li's slightly confused expression, Grina was so enraged that he felt as if he was about to develop some internal injuries. He had been treating Lin Li as his archenemy, yet Lin Li didn't even know who he was, which was simply the greatest contempt for him. Seeing the situation, ManhwaRecap hurriedly stood between the two of them and said to Lin Li with a smile, President Falik, this is just a minor misunderstanding. Since you two have now met, I think it's heaven's will that you two should clear up the misunderstanding and bury the hatchet. What do you think? As a politician, ManhwaRecap was obviously good at lying through his teeth too. He actually called the meeting something that was arranged by fate according to heaven's will. If Lin Li and Grina really intended to make up with each other, but couldn't bring themselves to lower their pride, they would be able to use this excuse to do so. Unfortunately, Grina did not want to patch things up with Lin Li at all. On the one hand, it was because he couldn't give up the seahorse slaves for some reasons, and on the other hand, it was because of the humiliating incident that occurred in front of the embassy of the Tower of Dusk which made him feel extremely ashamed. At this time, the fact that he did not immediately take action against Lin Li was already enough respect shown for ManhwaRecap. How could he possibly accept that it was just a misunderstanding? On the other hand, Lin Li felt that there was no need to make up with Grina, since the latter was the one who'd created trouble at the Tower of Dusk's embassy in the first place. If trying to snatch the seahorse slaves by force could be considered a misunderstanding, everything in this world could probably be considered a misunderstanding. However, Lin Li didn't take it to heart either, because if the Giant Shark Clan wanted to continue behaving insensibly, he wouldn't mind letting them know that he was not to be trifled with. In the end, no one responded to ManhwaRecap's words, which made him feel embarrassed and extremely helpless. He had no choice but to say, okay, the auction is about to begin. No matter what, I think we should all calm down before waiting for the opportunity to speak later. HMPH. I'll let you have an advantage this time. If you're smart enough, you'd better send them to me obediently. Otherwise, if anything were to happen to you at sea, don't blame me for not warning you. After issuing a stern warning, Grina left with his subordinates and headed straight to the entrance of the auction hall. Seeing that Grina had left, Monterey secretly heaved a sigh of relief and then turned to helplessly say to Lin Li, President Flick, I'm not scaring you, but if you don't have a pressing need for those seahorse slaves, it'd be better for you to do the giant shark clan a favor and send the slaves to them. After all, this is the endless ocean, and the Gilded Kingdom only has rights over this area of the sea. We have no authority to interfere with what the people of the Sea Clan do out there. Thanks for the kind reminder, Prince Monterey, but you don't have to worry about this matter. I can handle it myself, Lin Li said indifferently, waving his hand. So what if the giant shark clan was the overlord of the ocean? Once he released the Sky Castle, there would be nothing they could do. In fact, even with the star alone, Lin Li wouldn't have to be afraid of Grina's threat at all. Hearing Lin Li's response, Prince Monterey couldn't help but sigh secretly, knowing that his efforts were futile. Hence, he had no choice but to set this matter aside for the time being, and take Lin Li and Connorus to the auction venue. At this juncture, almost all the seats at the auction venue had been occupied. There were humans and all sorts of sea clans. If any timid people were to barge in, they might just get frightened to death. Among those present, Lin Li also recognized some familiar ones, such as the representatives of the forces of the Breezy Plains, Claus, Joseph, and the others. The representatives of the Felon Kingdom and Leaden Kingdom, as well as the Brilliant Shrine and the Darkness Shrine, on the other hand, were seated in the VIP private rooms on the second floor. Due to the fact that the side facing the auction stage was open, the people in the private room could be seen at a glance. Lin Li also saw some of the representatives of the Elven Kingdom and the Dwarf Kingdom in the VIP private rooms. Lin Li could tell that the Gilded Kingdom had created quite a stir this time. Almost all the top forces of Anril and the Endless Ocean were gathered at the auction this time. In addition to the ones Lin Li could recognize, there were several other people in the private room who seemed rather peculiar. All the pure humans in Anril looked exactly like the ones from the world that Lin Li was in before he transmigrated. However, the few people in the private room Lin Li saw had yellow skin and black hair, which he felt was something familiar. But Lin Li knew that they definitely had nothing to do with the world he was from. Rather, they were from some secret continent of this world that was far away from Anril. Of course, that also made Lin Li a little interested in that mysterious continent. He wondered if the situation there was similar to the one in the world that he had come from before he transmigrated. He hoped that he would be able to travel to that mysterious continent on the star and have a look when he had the time to someday. Under the lead of Prince Monterey, Lin Li quickly arrived at a VIP private room on the second floor of the auction hall. It had a luxurious and extravagant decor that didn't consist only of a wide variety of precious decorative materials, but rather there were also art pieces on the walls, which should have been displayed in the exhibition hall. It made the private room seem opulent, but not tacky. President Flick, are you satisfied with this palace? Monterey asked Lin Li with a smile. He had put in a lot of effort into decorating the private room, and although the room number was not one of the first few, it was decorated according to the standard of the private rooms that were exclusive to royals. Monterey had used his wits in this instance. Those who were outside the private room wouldn't be able to tell that it was Prince Monterey's preferential treatment for the Tower of Dusk, but the interior decor of the private room was a complete display of the Gilded Kingdom's utmost sincerity towards Lin Li. Anyone who wasn't blind would be able to tell how sincere the Gilded Kingdom was. Lin Li glanced at the decorations in the private room and somewhat understood the intentions of the Gilded Kingdom. Hence, he nodded and said, "Thank you very much, this is a nice place, I'll stay here." Prince Monterey, if you have some matters to handle, please go ahead. You're chasing me away as soon as we enter, how depressing. Although Prince Monterey did intend to leave for a while, he did not expect Lin Li to chase him away so quickly. Fine, I won't dwell on the details as long as the outcome is perfect. Prince Monterey comforted himself while bidding goodbye to Lin Li. He could now go to King Bradler and report everything to him. After Prince Monterey left, Lin Li and Connorus sat facing the auction site while tasting the wine that was on the table and looking at the various humanoid creatures who had bizarre appearances. The Sea Clan was a massive clan, and the opposite of the Sea Clan should not be the human race, but all intelligent races on the mainland. However, the human race was very strong and powerful in Anril, almost overshadowing the other races. Hence, the human race had become the representative of the races on land. Apart from the previously mentioned 7 overlords of the Endless Ocean, there were many other clans of various sizes among the Sea Clan. For example, the giant lobster clan, that had a large pair of pincers, was actually quite strong at combat, and not at all inferior compared to the 7 overlords. Their status in the endless ocean was probably equivalent to that of a top force of the breezy plains. There were also clans such as the Walrus clan, the Giant Crab clan, the Swordfish clan, and many others, and they were all major forces in the endless ocean. There were also some peculiar clans such as the Sea Ghoul clan, that almost had no fixed form. They were actually not related to undead creatures, and were instead closer to water elemental creatures. There was also the Underwater Tree Men clan, that was said to have formed from a team of elves that fled to the endless ocean and used some secret technique to turn themselves into that form in order to be able to survive in the sea. There were many such sea clans in the endless ocean, but only those who were present now were qualified to come here. The weaker and smaller sea clans would either become affiliated with a certain overlord or quietly struggle to survive in the sea. They obviously wouldn't have the chance to participate in such a grand auction. While Lin Li was waiting for the auction to begin, the vague sounds of an argument could be heard coming from a certain room behind the auction stage, even though the doors were tightly shut. All the people who passed by the door couldn't help but quickly speed up and leave as if there was a terrifying existence in the room. In the room whose doors were tightly shut, the two parties who were engaged in an argument were a white-haired elderly man and Prince Monterey. The fact that the white-haired elder would have such a heated argument with Prince Monterey, who had a high status, meant that the elderly man naturally wasn't an ordinary person. Grand Duke Viti, His Majesty has personally instructed that regardless of what item President Philip brings, it must be put up as the final item of the auction. Prince Monterey came over this time because he was instructed by Bradler to find out about the auctioning of Lin Li's magic scroll. Grand Duke Viti was also a member of the royal family of the Gilded Kingdom, and his father was Prince Ronsent, the younger brother of Bradler's grandfather. However, according to the rules of the succession of titles in the Gilded Kingdom, Viti had to automatically lower his title by 1 level after inheriting his father Prince Ronsent's title, thus becoming a duke. The system had been implemented with a decree in order to maintain the vitality of the nobility of the Gilded Kingdom. According to the decree, the underachieving descendants of a noble would have their title lowered by 1 level, and if it continued across the succeeding generations, their descendants might eventually become commoners. However, if someone made a great contribution to the Gilded Kingdom, their title might be promoted to a duke, and it wasn't impossible for them to become princes again as long as they were of the royal bloodline. As opposed to the political genius Monterey, Grand Duke Viti could be considered a business prodigy of the royal family of the Gilded Kingdom. Under the management of Grand Duke Viti, the royal treasury of the kingdom had been enjoying a steady and rapid growth. The royal trade union that Grand Duke Viti managed was one of the largest trade unions in the Gilded Kingdom, and generated a massive amount of wealth for the royals each year. At this rate, Grand Duke Viti would probably be rightfully promoted to the title of Prince in a few years. The white-haired Grand Duke Viti was overwhelmed with fury as he glowered at Monterey without showing any weakness. Monterey, don't you know that you're tarnishing the reputation of our auction by doing this? This is not something that we can lie about. Once the final item is displayed, everyone will be able to tell that there's something wrong with it. The reputation of an auction was very important, and the people were willing to attend the auction and bid for the items available because they believed that they could buy authentic goods there, regardless of how much they might cost. However, if an item that was obviously of inferior quality was put up for auction as the final item, what would the people who attended the auction think, even if they had already auctioned off the previous items? The appearance of an inferior item would make them lose trust in the auctioneer, and even doubt the quality of the items that they had bought. More importantly, the auction was officially held by the Gilded Kingdom. If the credibility of the auction was tarnished, it would be akin to the reputation and credibility of the Gilded Kingdom being damaged. When the time came, the Gilded Kingdom's reputation in the Endless Ocean, or perhaps even in the entire Anral, would be greatly damaged. Prince Monterey had, of course, thought about that issue. Nevertheless, he waved his hand unconcernedly and said, Grand Duke Viti, I understand what your concerns are, but don't worry. As long as you put up Felix item for auction as a final item, it won't matter if it has a corresponding value or not. As long as the price that it fetches is compatible to its position, no one can say anything. It was clear what Prince Monterey meant. Even if the item was a useless piece of garbage, no one would suspect that it was useless as long as he offered a staggering price and won the bid for it. You don't have to continue. I call the shots at this auction. Even if His Majesty Bradler comes, my decision will remain the same. I won't allow this to happen at my auction. I don't understand your political tricks and strategies, and I won't let you tarnish my reputation. If you are dissatisfied with me, feel free to let someone else take over. Grand Duke Viti resolutely refuted again adamantly when faced with Prince Monterey's persuasion, leaving no room for negotiation. Grand Duke Viti was a business genius, but he didn't know much about politics. In fact, it could be said that he absolutely loathed politics. In his opinion, the Gilded Kingdom could resort to other means to improve relations with the Tower of Dusk, or even directly offer them some benefits. There was no reason for them to make him risk losing his entire reputation for this. Grand Duke Viti, please simmer down, we're discussing this with you now, aren't we? If you don't agree, we will naturally have to respect your opinion. No one else is more suitable to be in charge of this auction than you. Seeing how agitated Grand Duke Viti was, Prince Monterey hurriedly tried to comfort him. They had already promoted the auction and done lots of publicity for it. If they were to replace Grand Duke Viti with someone else at the last minute, it would definitely lead to lots of speculation, and it would then be more difficult to settle the matter. Seeing that Monterey had relented, Grand Duke Viti finally looked slightly less hostile, and he said, Monterey, it's not that I'm being too stubborn and rigid, but rather that business is different from politics. Once a business reputation is damaged, it won't be that easy to rebuild it even if you try to make up for it by paying 10 times or even 100 times the price for your actions. If you want to curry favor with President Flick, you may do so with him in private. Well, it's not your first time doing that anyway. However, this is my auction, so my rules apply. I will never allow such a thing to happen during my auction. That would be an insult to me and to all the people involved in the auction. You will never be able to pay that price. Although Monterey's title and status were higher than those of Grand Duke Viti in the Gilded Kingdom, he was still Grand Duke Vitis Jr., so he couldn't put on airs as the prince. Hence, he had no choice but to nod while Grand Duke Viti lectured him. He then said, you're right, but the Illuminatus relationship with us is concerned too. Even if you can't put it up as a final item, you can at least arrange for it to appear at a good time. One of the most important positions for items during an auction was the opening item. It did not refer to the first item to be auctioned, but rather the first item that had a value that corresponded to the status of the auction after several mediocre items had been auctioned off as a warm-up for the auction. In fact, the auctions of those mediocre items were meant to buy some time for the latecomers. Next, it would be the item that was showcased during the climax halfway through the auction. Throughout the auctions, there would be a few small climaxes according to schedule. The items that were put up for auction in the middle of the auction would usually encounter a huge bidding frenzy. Towards the end of the auction, there would also be several consecutive final items that would be up for bidding, pushing the auction to its ultimate climax. Monterey meant that Grand Duke Viti should at least let Lin Li's item be up for bidding at a good moment even if it couldn't be put up as the final item. That would at least make things less awkward. The last thing he wanted was for Lin Li's item to be auctioned as a mediocre item that was meant to patronize the guests because that wouldn't attract much attention. Worse still, no one might bid for it. Monterey was not too worried about the latter possibility, but he knew that it would still make Lin Li look bad. However, Grand Duke Viti refused to concede, and simply said with a sullen expression, the timing that the item is displayed during my auction depends on its true value. A worthless piece of garbage won't even qualify to be one of the first several items to be auctioned, let alone take other positions. Okay, that's enough. The auction is about to begin soon. Please go. Grand Duke Viti didn't give Monterey a chance to speak at all as he simply pushed the door open and asked Monterey to leave. Prince Monterey had no choice but to shake his head and walk out while thinking about how he could make Lin Li seem as glorious as possible without making others feel that the Gilded Kingdom was holding themselves cheap. However, when Prince Monterey left, Grand Duke Vitis' expression was still as sullen as he paced around the room anxiously and somewhat nervously. He would look at the door from time to time, seemingly waiting for something. All of a sudden, footsteps began to shuffle outside the door, and before the person reached the door, Grand Duke Viti hurried over to pull open the door. As soon as the door was opened, Grand Duke Viti had a look of disappointment on his face. He looked at the person at the door and chided, "Why are you being so panicky? Look how disgracefully you're behaving." The person who came was a supervisor of the auction. Upon being reprimanded by Grand Duke Viti, he was so shocked that he flinched and said, "Grand Duke Viti, it's time to begin. Do you think we should start?" "What? Damn it. Why hasn't there been any result from those guys? It's just a paper scroll. Why are they taking so long to figure it out? How dare they have the cheek to ask for a higher remuneration?" Grand Duke Viti cursed as he turned around in a huff and entered the room again. The supervisor of the auction followed him inside with a sheepish grin and said, "Grand Duke Viti, I guess they should be able to reach a conclusion soon. Do you think we should wait for a while, or should we begin the auction right away? Maybe they'll come to a conclusion after we auction off a few items. What if there is no outcome at the end? What if the final verdict is that the scroll is of zero value? Damn it, we're holding an auction, but they can't even get a clear idea of the auction item. What am I raising this bunch of good-for-nothings for?" Although Grand Duke Viti cursed with dissatisfaction, He had obviously lowered his volume greatly because the good for nothings that he was referring to were clearly some people he didn't quite dare to offend. If all else fails, how about we do a no reserve bid for that item? Although we can't figure out what that scroll is, that power is absolutely genuine. When it's time to auction it, we will not give an introduction, and just put it on display. It'll be up to the bidder's discretion, and they can decide on their own. The supervisor of the auction was a smart person too, and he immediately came up with an idea that maybe wasn't quite feasible, but they had no choice except to adopt it as a last resort. Hearing this solution, Grand Duke Viti couldn't help his eyes lighting up as he reached out to pat the man on the shoulder. He said, "Okay, that's a great idea. If nothing else works, we'll go ahead with it. Now, follow me to the front." After being praised by Grand Duke Viti, the supervisor of the auction suddenly grinned joyously. He was almost certain that he would definitely receive more than just a simple compliment from Grand Duke Viti. Although he might not be promoted to a high post, he would have a bright future. Grand Duke Viti soon arrived at the front of the auction hall. He fixed his clothes and appearance a little before striding onto the auction stage. As Grand Duke Viti appeared, the noise in the auction hall ceased immediately as all eyes were on the auction stage. "Dear honored guests, a very warm welcome from the Gilded Kingdom that you have traveled across many miles to come to." Grand Duke Viti had hosted many auctions before, including several large-scale ones like this one. Hence, he was very familiar with opening speeches, and it could be said that they simply rolled off his tongue. After the opening speech, the auction hosted by Grand Duke Viti officially began. Immediately afterwards, the first several auction items were brought to the stage. However, everyone knew that even at such a large auction, the auction items used for the warm-up definitely wouldn't be impressive. Hence, it was relatively quiet in the auction hall. At this moment, Prince Monterey had already returned to King Bradler's private room, and told him about the content of the conversation he had with Grand Duke Viti. After hearing Monterey's account, Bradler smiled bitterly with a helpless expression. Shaking his head, he said, "I knew it, Viti is too stubborn to be convinced. In this case, the item that President Fulik brought should be put up for bidding at the start of the auction, right?" Previously, Bradler had also heard from Saint Edmund and the others that the Tower of Dusk seemed to be better known for their capabilities in pharmaceutics than potions. Hence, when he asked the Foreign Affairs Minister to look for Lin Li, he instructed him to request for Lin Li to put 2 potions up for auction. However, he didn't expect Lin Li to be so unrelenting, or rather insensible, to have decided to put a scroll up for auction. If the scroll had been created by a famous master, he would have had nothing to say, but it had turned out to be Lin Li's creation. Bradler did not believe that Lin Li, an incredibly young sanctuary powerhouse, would actually have time to study inscriptions. Even if he occasionally dabbled in it, there would definitely still be a significant difference in his skills compared to true inscribers, who specialize solely in their field. Thus, he assumed that the value of the scroll had to be very low. In his opinion, Lin Li's scroll would probably be only considered a mediocre item that was to be used to buy some time at the auction. Hence, Bradler asked Prince Monterey to go look for Grand Duke Viti in hopes of leveraging on his power to make Lin Li's scroll the final item of the auction. Since Grand Duke Viti had rejected Monterey, he reckoned that Lin Li's scroll would probably be one of the few items that were used for the warm-up. With that thought in mind, Bradler said to Monterey, "There's nothing we can do now. Pay attention to the situation at the auction. Once you see Fulik's scroll, bid for it with a decent price." If it was a bid for the final auction item, Bradler would be willing to offer a remarkable amount of gold coins to purchase the scroll that seemed to be of little use to him without making others suspect anything or find that something was amiss. However, he would be seen as a fool if he paid such a large amount of gold coins for a lousy item. Bradler was just trying to carry out Saint Edmund's instructions and build a good relationship with Lin Li, but that didn't mean that he was willing to be a fool in the eyes of the people. "Your Majesty, there is one more thing that I think we should exploit." Prince Monterey knew that if Lin Li's magic scroll was displayed at the beginning, they definitely couldn't offer an exaggerated price for it, so they would have to think from other perspectives. Bradler looked down, turned around, and asked, "What's the matter?" When waiting for the auction to begin today, I accompanied President Fulik around the exhibition hall to appreciate the art pieces, and I discovered that he seemed to have a huge interest in a particular painting. Although Prince Monterey did not understand why Lin Li would be interested in such a painting, he thought that it would be a good point that they could make use of. "Is that so? A painting? I didn't expect Fulik to have such a hobby. Well then, we can save ourselves some effort. Which painting does he have his eye on?" Hearing this news, Bradler smiled faintly. Although the artworks displayed in the exhibition hall were all fine and exquisite masterpieces that had an immeasurable value, giving Lin Li the painting would be much easier than spending a large amount of money on a useless piece of garbage in his opinion. Prince ManhwaRecap thought back for a while before saying to Bradler, "Your Majesty, the painting the President Fulik likes is one of the gifts that the Octopus clan gave us back then, which is said to be the masterpiece of Heldanos, a famous figure of the Octopus clan." Upon hearing his answer, Bradler frowned slightly because that painting was a diplomatic gift from the Octopus clan, and its value was secondary to its symbolic significance. If it was a painting created in the Gilded Kingdom, he wouldn't be put in a tough spot. However, it was a diplomatic gift, so he would have to consider the diplomatic implications and how the Octopus clan would react if he gave it to Lin Li. Is there something special about that painting? As soon as Bradler asked the question, he vetoed his conjecture because if there really had been something special about it, the Octopus clan probably wouldn't have sent it to them as a diplomatic gift. Prince ManhwaRecap naturally shared similar sentiments, and he shook his head with some bewilderment in his eyes. He answered, "There shouldn't be anything special about it. It might be because Heldanos is quite famous in the Octopus clan, so I reckon that it should be fine as long as I communicate with the Octopus clan about it." "Yes, but we can't give it to Fulik just like that. Hasn't he already seen that painting previously? Put it up for auction, then tell Vidi to add one more slot for another auction item. He shouldn't be so stubborn and turn down such a simple request." Bradler's plans were quite well thought. He would be stooping too low if he gave it straight to Lin Li as a gift, but if he put it up for auction, Lin Li should be able to guess his intentions. Thus, he would be able to withhold his dignity while achieving his goal of showing some goodwill to Lin Li, which could be considered the best of both worlds. ManhwaRecap had the same intentions, but before putting up Heldanos' painting for auction, he would still have to communicate with the Octopus clan and inform them about it. Otherwise, the Octopus clan might be offended if they put up the diplomatic gift, which was a symbol of their friendship, up for auction. Communication was ManhwaRecap's forte, or rather the forte of most politicians. Sugarcoating things was what politicians were best at doing. They could turn the bad things into good, and make disasters sound like a reflection of the nation's spirit. They could come up with 1,000 explanations for their act of gifting someone's gift to another person, and even make them feel that it was for the sake of mutual friendship. Lin Li, who was seated in the luxurious private room, had no idea that his interest in the painting had caused the two big shots of the Gilded Kingdom to be so overwrought and busy. He and Connorus were enjoying some wine while watching the auction. In fact, Lin Li had a relatively clear idea of what he wanted to buy at the auction this time. As long as it didn't exceed certain standards, he would definitely buy it regardless of the price he had to pay. Of course, there were still some uncertainties because there hadn't been any information about the last few mystery finale items of the auction, so he reckoned that there might be some that would appeal to him. However, the items that were displayed at first didn't arouse his interest. One of the first 3 items to be displayed was a fine and luxurious sword that a certain big shot had used before, and which was decorated with many gemstones. Its aesthetic and decorative value was far beyond its practicality. Next, there was a dragon's eye gemstone that was the size of a fist, and would definitely allow the user to possess the attack power of a dragon if it was embedded in a magical weapon. Lastly, there was a magical accessory of the High Elves that contained legendary level defensive power. If those 3 items were displayed at ordinary auctions, they would definitely be given good positions, and might even cause a considerable bidding climax. However, they were considered mediocre here, and although they didn't end up being unsold, it only took 2 to 3 bids for each of them to be auctioned off. Now that a few items have been auctioned off, I believe those of you who have seen the auction items on display are getting a little impatient. I believe that the item that's up next will definitely make this trip worth your while. The host of the auction, Grand Duke Vidi, waved his hand and instructed his subordinates to bring over the main auction items. When he realized that the guests were already starting to get into the mood, the auction item was covered with a red cloth, and it seemed to be taller than the average human. It was carried over to the display platform on the stage by 2 men. Due to the fact that most of the previous auction items had been displayed without any concealment, there hadn't been much suspense. Grand Duke Vidi walked over and reached his hand out to clutch the red cloth, after which he gave it an abrupt tug to lift it. A set of dark golden armor was revealed, and it exuded a luxurious, majestic vibe under the spotlight of the auction venue. The base of the armor was dark golden, and sanguine patterns could be seen vaguely, making the armor seem even more mysterious. It was a set of full-body armor that included a helmet and boots. All the parts were hung and put together to form the shape of a human body. There was a faceplate on the helmet, and a visor that was made of crystal, as well as a sanguine gemstone on the forehead of the armor. Under the light, it was emitting rays of red light. The armor also consisted of pieces that covered the shoulders and chest. The pauldrons were each shaped like a menacing beast with intimidating white fangs, while the breastplate was covered in complicated mageths. The light of the mana flowed along the mana circuits, emitting an alluring brilliance. Further down, there was a soft armor made of dragon hide covering the abdomen. It provided enough defense and protection without affecting the flexibility and agility of the wearer. The skirt of the armor consisted of layers of palm-sized scale-like armor pieces that were stacked together, each flickering with the light of the mageths. The armor further below covered the legs and feet completely, and only the parts at the joints were made of the hide of worms. The armor was rotating slowly on the high display platform on the stage, giving the audience a 360-degree view of the armor. At the same time, there was also a large magic projection at the back that displayed every single detail of the armor with precision. Not to mention the distinct features of the armor, even some small scratches were fully displayed in the projection. Grand Duke Vidi waited for a moment to give the crowd some time to observe the armor. He then introduced, "This armor is called Dark Gold Magic Dragon Armor and was left behind by the Ocean Dynasty from ancient times. Legend has it that it was the exclusive armor of the Ocean Divine General, Baccarat. The basic material used in the armor is the Ocean Purgatory adamantine from a huge vortex in the center of the Endless Ocean, as well as the skin of an abyssal demon dragon at the peak of the legendary realm. The mageth on the armor is a domain barrier that only a sanctuary powerhouse can cast. It also contains a great mageth that will increase the user's strength by 100 times. There are also instantaneous lightning mageths that will increase one's speed and so on." In ancient times, the various sea clans were unified and belonged to a single dynasty that was ruled by the Sea Horse clan. It could be seen from the characteristics of the current sea clans just how powerful they would be when united. The Giant Shark Knights were close combat assailants that would attack at the front, while the Siren clan's archers would be in charge of long-range attacking. The Thunder Eel clan's Thunder Mages would be responsible for casting spells, and the Jellyfish clan's pharmacists would concoct potions for recovery and healing. However, thousands of years ago, the Seahorse clan suddenly lost their power for some reason, and a huge power struggle broke out among the clans as they vied to be the next ruler, thus resulting in the Great Ocean War. Now, some of the sea clans had become the 7 overlords of the ocean, and those that had no special abilities were either lingering around and struggling to survive, or have all been driven to extinction. No one could unify them and recreate the glory of the Ocean Dynasty. During the reign of the Ocean Dynasty, the Ocean Divine General Baccarat was the commander of the Giant Shark Knights, and he was said to have peak sanctuary level power. He had allegedly performed brilliantly in all the wars with the High Elves. However, before the fall of the Ocean Dynasty, the Ocean Divine General died under the full swing attack of the High Elf Sky Castle during a war with the High Elves. The Dark Gold Magic Dragon armor was actually just a spare set of armor belonging to Baccarat. The armor that he had used during the battle was actually a stronger one called the Sea God armor, which had been turned into dust together with his body by the attack of the Sky Castle. For the current sea clans, that history was a distant past, so Baccarat was now like a mythical figure to them, and didn't bring them a huge shock. Their true concern was still the power of the Dark Gold Magic Dragon armor. If it was just a useless piece of junk, it wouldn't be worth their money even if it had been worn by a deity. Although the Dark Gold Magic Dragon armor was only Baccarat's spare armor, it was still a very powerful magic armor, set in this era according to Grand Duke Vidis' introduction. Otherwise, it wouldn't have qualified to be Baccarat's spare armor. The most powerful attribute of the Dark Gold Magic Dragon armor was the domain barrier. Domain worlds could be created and owned only by mages. Even sanctuary-level warriors wouldn't be able to create their own domain worlds, let alone use their domains to defend themselves like mages. However, the combination of mageth arrays on the armor gave it sanctuary-level power, which was the best defense. Next, it was the powerful mageth, which seemed to be straightforward, and whose functions could be deduced from its name, but it did not mean that it was rudimentary. The powerful mageth could be considered a mageth that was used the most frequently in armors or magical equipment. However, the best powerful mageths generally increased the power by at most over 10 times. However, the powerful mageth on the Dark Gold Magic Dragon armor could increase one's power by 100-fold? How incredible would it be if the power of the Giant Shark clan, which had massive strength by nature, was increased by 100-fold. If the people of the Giant Shark clan were to wear the Dark Gold Magic Dragon armor, they would probably be able to flatten a mountain peak with a single punch, after being enhanced by the powerful mageth. Clearly, the Dark Gold Magic Dragon armor was a suit of armor that was made for the Giant Shark clan. Hence, when Grand Duke Vidi announced the start of the bidding for the armor, the people of the Giant Shark clan immediately placed a bid that was double the starting bid, pushing the price to 2 million gold coins. Connorus, this armor seems to be quite useful for you. Do you want it? Lin Li asked. His main close combat fighters were Connorus and Norfaller. However, being an assassin, Norfaller wouldn't benefit from the armor, so it seemed that only Connorus would need it. However, after looking out of the private room to look at the auction item, Connorus shook his head in disdain and declined. That kind of thing is only suitable for those brainless shark monsters. It won't be of any use to me. In fact, that wasn't very surprising. In terms of strength, Connorus' perfect body was several times stronger than those of the giant shark clan, and it was even comparable to the ancient Wyrms and Titans. Besides, Connorus was not purely a close combat fighter. As a great ancient demon deity, close combat and magic were his forte, and wearing the armor might affect his performance instead. Hence, the dark gold magic dragon armor wouldn't provide much help for him, and would instead even become his burden. Seeing that Connorus did not want it, Lin Li naturally did not bother to say anything more. Besides, that armor might be rare for others, but Lin Li could create armor that was even more powerful as long as he had enough time and materials. In fact, even Angelano's funny-looking armor might not be inferior to the dark gold magic dragon armor. Of course, the value of the dark gold magic dragon armor was not ordinary for the Sea clan. In particular, the domain barrier gave the armor an extremely excellent defensive power, even though it could not be compared to the domain world of sanctuary masters. If a legendary level sword sage were to wear the armor, there would probably be no problem for him to contend with sanctuary powerhouses. After the people of the giant shark clan offered a price of 2 million gold coins, there was a brief moment of silence in the auction hall, but soon it became lively again. The people of the Sea Serpent clan quoted a price of 2,500,000 gold, and before Grand Duke Viti could ask if anyone would offer higher bids, the barbarous Whale clan placed a bid of 4 million gold coins. The bidding stopped for a moment at the price of 4 million gold coins, but immediately afterwards, it shot up again by 500,000 gold coins. Those who had previously placed bids had no choice but to give up, while some gritted their teeth. Apart from a few sea clans, even the Octopus clan joined the bidding. Among the various sea clans, the Octopus clan should be considered one of the few more financially powerful ones. Their main source of income was their magic scroll business, which was about to monopolize the magic scroll industry. Although the giant shark clan was also the strongest of the 7 overlords of the sea, and even controlled the largest Red Sea region, their economic growth was mediocre in comparison to the Octopus clans. The prince of the Octopus clan, Harquis, suddenly joined in the bidding. Apart from the presence of Grina of the giant shark clan, whom he didn't get along with, the most important reason that he decided to join the auction was the mageth on the armor. A mageth that could create a domain barrier was definitely a mageth that was close to the peak of the guru level. For Harquis, it was definitely worth studying. However, in the eyes of Grina, the only reason Harquis would do that was to irritate him. The giant shark clan and the Octopus clan were not considered archenemies, but their relationship definitely wasn't cordial, especially between Grina and Harquis, who could argue for 3 days and 3 nights. In fact, it wasn't the first time that people would do such things to irritate each other at auctions. During the auctions at the sea market in the past, such actions were commonplace. People would insist on buying things they didn't need, just to anger their enemies. Even if they didn't succeed in buying it in the end, they would still be thrilled to have raised the price and made the other party spend a huge sum of money. Of course, such things did not happen only between Harquis and Grina. Anyway, the several sea clans had never gotten along very well with each other. It would either be Grina and Manson vying with each other or some other big shots vying with each other. Actually, in the end, no one was the true winner, because the one who reaped the most profit was the auctioneer. Due to the competition between them, an item that could have been sold at 5 million gold coins ended up being auctioned off at more than 10 million gold coins. After Grina offered a price of 10 million gold coins, the tension in the auction hall finally eased. The only person who was still bidding was Harquis of the Octopus clan. The others who tried to win the bid for the dark gold magic dragon armor were intimidated, and decided to give up halfway through the auction. 10 million gold coins going once. 10,000,000 gold coins going twice. Grand Duke Viti exclaimed while suppressing his joy. 10 million gold coins was definitely a good price for the auction. In the private room that the giant shark clan was in, Grina had already picked up a glass of wine and was tasting it while waiting for Grand Duke Viti to call the 3rd time, and the dark gold magic dragon armor would belong to him. To him, 10 million gold coins was already a huge sum of money, and it was actually above his budget. If anyone offered a higher price, he would have no choice but to give up, or else it would affect his plans for later. However, Grina wasn't extremely worried about that point. He was afraid of affecting his plans for later, but so was everyone else. In fact, Before the auction began, they had engaged professionals to analyze a variety of situations. For example, if the Octopus clan was interested in an item, they would have rough estimates for how many gold coins they could spend on it, without affecting their plans for later. However, at this moment, someone in the auction hall spoke up just as Grand Duke Viti had raised the wooden hammer and was about to drop it, 12,500,000 gold coins. Upon hearing his voice, many people immediately turned their heads to look in the direction where the voice came from, only to see a human mage, who was seated in a private room on the second floor, with a bidding sign in his hand. Fulik Grina almost choked on a mouthful of wine when he heard the offer and hurriedly looked out the window, only to see that it was Lin Li, who was swaying the bidding sign. Lin Li was not deliberately going against Grina, but rather he suddenly recalled that he had a friend who also needed such armor. It was a warrior named Shan, whom he had befriended before he came to the breezy plains. However, after Lin Li arrived in the breezy plains and started managing the Tower of Dusk, Shan went under the tutelage of a certain sword sage. It had been a long time since then, and Lin Li reckoned that Shan should have already made significant progress. Lin Li was just that loyal to his friends. Once one became Lin Li's friend, they would forever remain his friend. Now that Lin Li had found armor that was suitable for Shan, a price of more than 10 million gold coins meant nothing to him. He didn't want to meet Shan again without a presentable gift. However, Grina had no idea about that, and he merely thought that Lin Li was purely going against him. However, when he was about to raise his bid again, Zoro of the Giant Shark clan, who was at the side, quickly reached out to stop him. Prince, please don't forget that we have further plans. We can let them have the armor for now. Anyway, they won't be able to leave the endless ocean. Grina might ignore the persuasion of others, but after hearing Zoro's words, he finally calmed down a little, and said with a cold and menacing smile, "Yes, we'll let him keep it for me, for a few days." At this moment, Grand Duke Viti called the bid for the third time, and finally lowered the wooden hammer in his hand forcefully. He declared, "Since there are no higher bids, the dark gold magic dragon armor is sold to President Fulik of the Tower of Dusk." "What are you buying such a thing for?" Connorus asked with some puzzlement. Although 12,500,000 gold coins was peanuts to the Tower of Dusk, it would be a waste to buy armor that would not be of any use. "Don't you remember that I had a warrior following me around back in Alana?" Lin Li said with a smile as he finished the wine in his glass in one go. Hearing Lin Li mention that matter, Connorus asked in shock, "Come to think of it, you mean that burly but silly guy?" Shan could be considered a giant among humans, and it wouldn't be exaggerated to call him a humanoid magical beast. He wasn't really silly, and was actually just a little naive. If he had really been a fool, he wouldn't have become the successor of that old man, whose name Lin Li did not know. "Yeah, I haven't seen him for a long time. When I came to the breezy plains, Shan went under the tutelage of an old man. When we parted, he was already almost breaking through level 15. With his talent and the teachings of that old man, he should have already reached the legendary level. This armor is the perfect meeting gift for him." Lin Li had never asked Shan whom exactly the latter had met in Alana, but based on the rapid progress that Shan had been making, Lin Li could tell that the person who taught him definitely wasn't an ordinary person. Only then did Lin Li put his mind at ease and go to the breezy plains. Actually, it had already been a few years, and based on Scene's fast progress, the person who taught him would have had to be a fool if Shan hadn't reached the legendary level yet. However, Lin Li didn't know if Shan would go to the Tower of Dusk to look for him. In order to prepare a meeting gift for Shan, Lin Li casually purchased the dark gold magic dragon armor, but it gave everyone at the auction a huge shock. It was the opening item, and yet it had fetched a price of more than 10 million gold coins. They reckoned that the competition later would, surely, be even more intense. Moreover, what surprised the people in the auction hall was not the price of the item. Well, all the people there were wealthy, and many of them could easily afford a sum of more than 10 million gold coins. What truly shocked them was the fact that Lin Li had the audacity to snatch something from Grina, Harquis of the Octopus clan, and Grina, who vied with each other, had equally powerful backgrounds, and though the Giant Shark clan was also the strongest of the 7 overlords at sea, the other 6 clans weren't necessarily afraid of them. However, they thought that the Tower of Dusk was just a small and nameless force of the breezy plains. Yet, they had the audacity to offend the Giant Shark clan. Aren't they afraid of dying in the endless ocean? However, some people soon thought of the 2 major incidents that happened in the Gilded Kingdom previously that were extremely humiliating to the latter, and how Lin Li managed to make them swallow their anger and not retaliate. Hence, They wondered what the background of the Tower of Dusk really was like, since they actually had the guts to offend the giant shark clan after escaping scot-free despite having offended the Gilded Kingdom. Fulik is really fearless. I really suspect that he doesn't feel scrupulous towards anyone in this world, exclaimed Bradler, who felt extremely vexed after seeing that Lin Li had offended Grina again. The previous incident had just been settled, and yet Lin Li had offended Grina again. He reckoned that he would have to rack his brains to think of a way to settle this dispute after the auction again. However, regardless of what others thought, Lin Li didn't bother considering the consequences he would bring about by doing so. He didn't even take Grina, the prince of the giant shark clan, seriously. So what if the giant shark clan was the strongest of the 7 overlords of the Endless Ocean? They weren't the ruler of the Endless Ocean anyway. Besides, even if the giant shark clan could control everything in the Endless Ocean, Lin Li wouldn't think that there was anything he had to worry about. After a small climax that arose because of the high price that the opening item fetched, the auction continued under Grand Duke Vida's presidency. The next item that was brought to the stage for auction was not any magical weapon or equipment, nor was it a rare and precious gemstone source. Instead, it was a deed from the Gilded Kingdom. The next auction item is the title deed of an island belonging to the Kubos family, Grand Duke Vidi said as he projected a map at the back to present the location of the island. He then began to introduce the island in detail. It was called Star Crescent Island, and was composed of a crescent-shaped main island and several star-shaped satellite islands. The island was roughly more than 100 square kilometers big, and there were 2 piers. The Kubos family's castle was on the main island, along with a building that was meant for the servants to stay in. Lin Li intended to acquire an island in the Gilded Kingdom, so that it could be used as the Tower of Dusk's residence there. However, the environment of Star Crescent Island did not meet his requirements. One reason was that it was too close to Four Seasons Island, and another was that there were no available resources on and around the island. It could be said that Star Crescent Island was only suitable for vacation, and it wouldn't bring any profits to Lin Li. However, for others, especially the nobles and merchants, Star Crescent Island was still relatively valuable. Hence, after Grand Duke Vidi introduced the island and announced the start of the bidding, many nobles and tycoons began to raise their bidding signs, and there were numerous bids, causing the price to soar to 3 million gold coins. It was 3 million gold coins, not 3 million copper coins. To put it in context, some commoners had never even seen a gold coin in their entire lifetime. 3,000,000 gold coins was extremely expensive for an island, and even if the island was made of gold, it probably wouldn't be worth so much money. However, being able to own an island like this near Four Seasons Island was a great honor and glory for the nobles and tycoons. In the end, Star Crescent Island was auctioned off to a tycoon from the Catfish clan for 3,600,000 gold coins. After the auctioning of Star Crescent Island, the people in the auction hall once again regained calm. The next few auction items were precious, but not very outstanding. Thus, they were auctioned off for several dozen or more millions of gold coins after a few rounds of bidding. Among them, the one with the highest value was a magical weapon from the Ocean Dynasty, a longbow made of starlight metal, and the tendons of a wyrm. As expected, it was auctioned off to Prince Cleve of the Siren clan. At this juncture, King Bradler and Prince Monterey, who were in the royal private room, were extremely bewildered. They were puzzled that the magic scroll that Lin Li had brought, which they thought was worthless, hadn't been put up for auction yet. Could it be that the value of the scroll is so low that it isn't even worthy of being a filler item? That's too mean of them. On the other hand, the staff of the auction had already sent the dark gold magic dragon armor that Lin Li had purchased to the private room that Lin Li and Conoris were in. The staff of the auction left after the deal was completed. Conoris then took a look at the dark gold magic dragon armor with a smile, and said, "This is a good thing. No wonder that punk of the giant shark clan would be willing to offer so much for it. If he finds out that you're intending to give it to that silly kid Sean as a meeting gift, I bet he'll be so enraged that he'll vomit blood." Lin Li didn't think that much about it. He decided to buy the dark gold magic dragon armor only because he needed it. If he hadn't needed the armor at all, Lin Li wouldn't have specially gone out of his way to place such a high bid on the armor. In his opinion, Grina was far less important than those over 10 million gold coins. After receiving the dark gold magic dragon armor, Lin Li took a closer look at the maggots on it, and paid specific attention to the ones that resulted in the formation of the domain barrier. In his opinion, the maggots were still rather poorly made, and there was still plenty of room for improvement. Of course, that didn't mean that he had suffered a loss. In fact, it was because Lin Li had been studying the Divine Smith level maggot for such a long time, that he could make such a critical judgment. Otherwise, the Magath would have been perfect to him. Those over 10 million gold coins shouldn't have gone to waste. Lin Li came to a conclusion after looking at the Magath. He then put the armor into the Ring of Endless Storm, before turning around to continue looking at the auction stage. At this time, there was already another very eye-catching auction item on the auction stage, which was something rather large. It was a spherical item that was more than 2 meters high, but was not as clear as a crystal ball. Instead, the interior seemed to be a little cloudy. If one looked carefully, they would be able to see that the clouds in the sphere were moving continuously like the clouds in the sky. I reckon some of you must have already recognized the next auction item. In that case, I won't keep you in suspense anymore. Indeed, this large crystal is precisely the mirage sphere of the mirage beast, which was a great ocean overload of the ancient times. The level of this mirage sphere is already close to the sanctuary level, and it can create a mirage as huge as Hyper City. Grand Duke Viti introduced the large mirage sphere behind him to the crowd on the stage with some excitement in his tone. Of course, he wasn't exactly excited, but rather he just wanted to set the mood. As expected, the crowd under the stage immediately had their interest piqued after hearing Grand Duke Viti's introduction. Some had heard of the prehistoric mirage beast, while some hadn't. Hence, the exchange made the auction hall rather noisy all of a sudden. It was said that in ancient times, there were countless powerful and terrifying existences in the endless ocean, just as there were countless prehistoric magical beasts in Anral. Some examples included the 9-headed sea dragon, the prehistoric barbarous whale, and the ancient black tortoise, which were all existences that were at the level of the ocean overlords. They were in fact superior to the ancient Wyrms and Titans. On the other hand, the prehistoric mirage beast was the overlord of the overlords at that time, and things like the 9-headed sea dragons were just its food. It was said that the mirage beast's talent was to create an illusion out of thin air, which was impossible to escape. Anyone who got trapped in it would end up being devoured by the mirage beast. Besides, as the mirage beast continued to grow, the illusions it created would change too. The range of the area it enveloped would also change. The larger the range, the more confusing the illusion. Once the mirage beast broke through to the sanctuary realm, the illusions it created would become real, and even stronger than the domain worlds that sanctuary masters created. They would basically form the prototype of a divine kingdom. Like sanctuary masters in their respective domain worlds, the prehistoric mirage beasts were like gods in the illusions that they created, in which they could manipulate the laws at will. At this stage, the illusion could no longer be called an illusion, because everything within it was real yet unreal. It was unreal because it was imagined by the mirage beast, but it was also real because it truly posed a lethal threat to the enemies. In their illusions, the mirage beasts could not only create powerful magical beasts, they could even create bizarre labyrinths and countless magic gears and magic traps that were beyond imaginable. It was all created from their imagination. The mirage beast's power to create illusions was hidden in the mirage sphere. If someone could obtain a mirage sphere, they would be able to stimulate the power within it through some special means, and create an illusion according to their imagination. However, the power of the mirage sphere could no longer be increased, and the level of the illusion that could be created would be limited to the level of the sphere. It had nothing to do with the user. Hence, regardless of whether the user of a legendary level mirage sphere was at the legendary realm or sanctuary realm, the effect would be the same. The level of the illusion would remain unchanged. According to Grand Duke Viti, the mirage sphere that was being auctioned now was at the peak of the legendary level, and its power contained a hint of the sanctuary realm power. Most mirage beasts would be reaching adulthood at that level. After reaching the sanctuary realm, it would truly be an invincible existence. However, even with just a trace of the power of the sanctuary realm, the illusion created by the mirage sphere would definitely have power that was not to be belittled. Perhaps the entire illusion was fake, but that trace of sanctuary level power could condense some truth that made it difficult to guard against. Moreover, due to the fact that it was not created with a Magath or array formations, breaking the illusion using some law was almost impossible. It could be said that such a mirage sphere was definitely the best item to use for guarding one's residence. Even the best thieves in the world might not be able to leave the illusion. Hence, after Grand Duke Viti introduced the mirage sphere in detail and announced the start of the bidding, the people in the hall immediately got into a bidding frenzy again. The starting price of the mirage sphere was 5 million gold coins, but the crowd managed to increase it to 10 million gold coins in the blink of an eye. However, as the price increased, some people had no choice but to withdraw from the bidding. After all, more than 10 million gold coins was not considered a small sum for the vast majority of people. According to the rate of the increase in price, the final transaction price of the mirage sphere should probably be at least 20-30 million gold coins. Although the power of the mirage sphere was coveted by many, it wasn't a must to get their hands on it for most people. After all, they had been living fine without the Mirage Sphere all these years. Simply put, the Mirage Sphere was the icing on the cake, and if one was wealthy, it would be fine to spend a large amount of money on it. However, there was no need to. Soon, those who were still continuing to bid for the Mirage Sphere were those from the major sea clans. Apart from them, there were also the representatives of the three human kingdoms, the Leaden Kingdom, the Felon Kingdom, and the Rotterdam Kingdom. There was also Archbishop Inglos of the Brilliant Shrine, who was likewise placing bids and pushing the price up, 20 million gold coins. When the bidding began to cool down, the Prince of the Thunder Eel clan, Manson, finally placed a bid of 20 million gold coins. The frenzy began again, and the bidding that had slowed down a little began to get heated again. It increased all the way to 29 million gold coins before slowing down again. Although there was only a small difference between 29 million and 30 million, the guests at the auction couldn't help but think about the consequences of paying over 30 million gold coins. That was the strange thing about human mentality. Each increment in price seemed to be a threshold to be crossed, and those who managed to cross it would have to compete with others until they reached the next threshold. Hence, if one went past the 30 million gold coin benchmark, they would basically have to consider if they could afford nearly 40 million gold coins. This Mirage Sphere is actually so valuable. However, it's just meant for the creation of an illusion. Even if it contained a trace of sanctuary level power, it wouldn't cause much impact on the sanctuary powerhouses, Connors said in disdain as he looked at those who kept raising their bids. Indeed, just as Connors said, the illusion created by the Mirage Sphere was just an illusion, and only when the sphere reached the sanctuary realm would everything in the illusion become real. Only then would it be a formidable, lethal weapon. It was just like the massive difference between a legendary mage and a sanctuary master. Not to mention dealing with sanctuary powerhouses, the illusion created by this Mirage Sphere would be far from enough to deal with Connors. That trace of sanctuary level power would not be able to do the slightest damage to Connors' perfect body at all. The remaining illusions were not lethal either, so Connors would be able to break through easily. However, Lin Li shook his head with a smile and said, "Aren't you usually quite smart? Why do you refuse to use your brain after you've gotten the perfect body? Look at these people who are bidding." Besides the overlords of the Endless Ocean, the ones who were bidding belonged to the three human kingdoms, which were very large forces in Anro. Of course, apart from them, others probably would not be able to afford tens of millions of gold coins. Connors looked at those people, only to realize that a few wealthy tycoons did not take part in the bidding for the Mirage Sphere. The few tycoons were not any less wealthy than the major sea clans and human kingdoms. In fact, legend had it that they were rich enough to afford an entire kingdom. Clearly, the remaining ones who were still bidding were not doing so because of the price. In that case, it was because of the function of the Mirage Sphere. Connors immediately figured out the reason, and said, "Indeed, that ability of the Mirage Sphere will come in pretty handy in war." Indeed, the illusion created by the Mirage Sphere could not pose a threat to sanctuary powerhouses, but there weren't that many sanctuary powerhouses in this world.
Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day.